Order the meeting of the Harwich Conservation Commission for September 7th. All set? We have a fairly full agenda. The first item that we have is a request for a change in plan for 4 Eastern Avenue, map 6, parcel G3-8, for a request to reconfigure the approved patio. Do we have a proponent here for that tonight?
Ledoux from Eastwood Company.
Okay.
Online.
Good evening.
How are you?
You're cutting in and out a bit.
Okay, I have an AC on in my room. Let me see if that affects it at all.
That's
Is that better?
Much better.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that. I'm here representing Joe and Kathy Reese, and they were before you for demo of their existing home and then to rebuild home on the site. And we have been building the new house, and they would now like to reconfigure the approved patio to be more functional. And I've described this in the letter, and as you can see on the proposed site plan, we're proposing to reconfigure the patio as shown on the plan, but they're not proposing any additional coverage. The patio will remain the same size and will not impact or have any negative impacts on the resource area. And also during the demolition of the former house on the site, a portion of the driveway that fell within the road layout was removed, and they'd like to repair this and replace some of what was pavement with some pavers or do a cobble apron of sorts, which is shown also on the site plan. And also, we believe that this will not have any negative impacts to the resource area and doesn't impact the site coverage or and is no closer to the resource area. And that's my presentation.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. For those people that are in attendance, ordinarily our conservation administrator, Amy Usowski, is here in person. However, she's home right now with fighting off a severe cold, so she's not able to join us, and part of that cold is a sore throat, which also I'm trying to make her not speak as much as she would ordinarily have to. So what she generally does is provide us with a site summary and her comments on each of these applications that we have before us. So I will read through what her comments are, try to paraphrase them, and then if she has any additional comments, I would ask her for those at the same time before we go to comments from the commissioners. On this particular application, she said that from her perspective, it doesn't change the square footage of the lot coverage. The square footage, it will remain the same, and the closest distance to the top of the bank will be the same as approved. So her recommendation for this application is approval to the change in plan. Amy, anything you would like to add to that?
Nothing further. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. So comments from commissioners. Wayne?
No, this is pretty simple.
Al?
No comment.
John?
No comments.
Stan, any questions? The only question I would have for you is the deck that's being removed, is that a wooden deck or?
Deck that's being removed. Is it a wooden deck?
Is
from
it-
what was on the existing home?
Yes.
Let's see. Everything that was on the site was removed. So that no longer exists.
Well, my question, I'm sorry. So my question for you basically is what we approved with respect to the deck being replaced, I assume is a wooden deck or a pervious deck. And as a corollary to that, you're now putting in a patio. Is that patio also going to be pervious?
That will be pervious, yes. Yeah, and the deck was totally removed and nothing replaced in that area. But yes, the patio was to be a pervious patio.
Okay. And the area that the deck covered previously, are you going to be reseeding that? It's going to be lawn?
Yes, that will be lawn area, and then you see that we have the.
That was a yes?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I see a head nod. That's good.
Yes.
All right. I have no other comments on that then. I think that this is fairly straightforward. No increase in hardscape. So with that, can we have a motion on this?
I'll move to approve the request for a change in plan for 4 Eastern Avenue, map 6, parcel G3-8.
May we have a second, please?
Second.
Second, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you very much.
You have a good night.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is a request for determination of applicability for 98 Chase Street. This is an addition.
Yep.
Welcome.
Peter Bernard, I'm the builder, working with the Dohertys.
Great. Would you like to explain your project here?
Sure, so basically the existing structure, the main house is gonna remain. We're proposing to remove the existing garage and the existing additions at the rear and left of the house facing it, and then rebuilding new additions and a new single-car garage on basically the same footprint, just a little bit expanded at the rear and on the left side of the garage, a very small amount. So within, very much close to the existing footprint of the house that's there now.
Okay. All right, great. Comments that I have from Amy. They'd like to put a 235 square foot addition onto an existing house. They also want to replace a garage in approximately the same footprint, although I notice those little difference in actually moving away from the sideline, right?
Yes.
The work is within the 200-foot riverfront area, outside the 100-foot buffer to the top of the coastal bank, but it's within floodplain. So if the proposed work is greater than 50% of the value of the existing structure, the whole house will need to be made flood compliant. Has that been determined?
Well, we're sort of going through the process and working our way up to the building commissioner to get a definitive answer on whether or not we're going to have to do that.
Okay,
We have, it's very difficult to get a definitive answer in these cases when it's sort of on the edge of what's there, but we're prepared and preparing to bring it to compliance if necessary.
okay. The existing top of foundation is 10 feet 6 inches, and the flood elevation zone here is 11 feet.
Correct.
So they don't require mitigation for work in the flood zone, and the only performance standards is that the work cannot cause more damage to an adjacent property in the event of a coastal flood, and I assume that's been determined since the garage is the closest structure, and
Right.
no fill is proposed, and she recommends approval with a -2 determination that the work will take place in a wetland resource area subject to coastal stone flowage, but will not have an adverse impact on that resource area. He says also with the condition that they do not use chemicals and fertilizers within the wetland buffers in the flood zone on this lot, which is standard. Amy, anything to add?
Just that the roof runoff from the structure should go into gutters, downspouts, and dry wells.
Okay. All righty, great. Questions from commissioners?
No.
Wayne? Ellen? John?
Yeah, I have a question. This isn't a complete plan, right? Because you don't know whether you're gonna have to do things to come into flood compliance?
Right, so it's always very difficult to get a definitive answer prior to applying for the permit. I feel that we are going to have to do it, and we're making arrangements. We've had a couple house lifters out to the house to look at it. But until we get to the building commissioner, which is, going through this process, we're not gonna know for sure what he's gonna require. So in addition to the plan that you have in front of you, if it turns out that we have to lift the house, the existing original structure, then there will be an additional foundation plan for that drawn up by Tom Moore.
But in the same footprint?
Exact same
you're just
footprint,
gonna
yeah.
Lift the foundation or the house by 6 inches or something? Is that?
Yeah, you just put it up in the air and get a proper 4-foot foundation around it with blowouts. I'm assuming they'd want vents on that foundation.
Okay, thank you.
Stan, any problems?
I don't have anything.
No? Is this be crawl space or the full foundation?
Right now, it's got sort of a, well, this is John, the owner.
Thank you.
In the old part of the home, it's a full basement. We would move all the mechanicals into the new part 100%. So the old, whatever is determined, if we need to fill it to a certain level. There's a bulkhead at one end, there's 3 windows on the other end, so I don't know if that works at all as a flood vent type situation. We can change that, but I would certainly rather not lift this old house, but.
Yeah, that's a building department determination, obviously, so. All right, good. That being said, any other comments, any questions from the audience on this, participants? All right. May we have a motion on this, please?
I'll move to approve the request for determination of applicability with a -2 determination for 98 Chase Street, map 11, parcel S7-1.
I'll second that.
Yeah, amend that to also include the application, the restriction on fertilizer application and dry wells and downspouts, for downspouts.
I accept that
Okay.
amendment.
Second that. Great, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Great,
All right,
thank you very much.
gentlemen.
Moving along, the next item on the agenda is a notice of intent for One Shore Drive. This is an application to raise and replace a single-family dwelling and a septic.
Do you have photos? Do you want to take those?
Yes, I will. I'll pass them along to Amy.
I have 3 projects.
All right, thank you very much.
Ernie, just please put those with the file.
Yep.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members. For the record, my name is Kieran Healy. I'm a land surveyor with the BSC Group, representing the owner of the property, Rick Tupper. At this site, we've got an existing dwelling that we're looking to modify. What we're looking to do is to remove the entire second story of the building and strip the first floor down to the studs. We're looking to maintain the foundation as it is, and we're looking to build up a more usable space on that second story. The changes that we're proposing to the exterior of the property, we are looking to put a deck on the rear of the property, and we're looking to put a porch on the front of the property. Within the 50-foot buffer, there is an existing shed and septic system. We are looking to remove the shed and put in plantings in that area, and we're also looking to remove the septic system that is within the 50-foot buffer and move it so that it's now going to be 60 feet from the edge of the wetland. The position that we have the septic system is literally the only spot on the property where it can go. There are wells on the north side, wells on the east side, and the house is between us and the rear property line, and then the wetland is to the southwest. So this is kind of the best location for a septic system, giving all of the setbacks that we can, the greatest amount possible. The existing drive-under garage was converted into a living space. My client is looking to remove the living space in that basement and bring it back to its original drive-under garage. The driveway is there. He purchased the house recently, and it was in pretty bad shape before he purchased it, and has been removing quite an amount of the debris and junk and other things left on the property. So he's been working on pulling those off the site and taking them off-site. Other than that, it's an existing dwelling that we're looking to remove a portion of, rebuild, and then add a deck and a farmer's porch to the front.
Okay. All right, good. Looking at Amy's comments, she mentioned that the new square footage of hardscape in the 50 to 100 buffer amounts to about 185 square feet per the narrative, but the plan says 485 square feet. She's guessing they counted 300 square feet of new leach area in the 485, is that right?
That's right, yes.
Okay. And she goes on to say, we've never counted the leach field as hardscape in need of mitigating. So her recommendation is that we go with 185 square feet of new hardscape, in the narrative being the accurate number. 2 times that for mitigation is 370 square feet. Only 175 square feet of mitigation is proposed in the plan, so we're short about 95 square feet or so. Actually, more than that, 100, thank you, 195, thank you. This is my mathematician over here. New septic has to go where it's proposed to be, as far as possible from wells. This neighborhood does not have town water, and also from the wetland. The existing septic is closer to the wetland than the proposed leach area. The proposed is 60 feet from the wetland, and the existing is less than 50 feet. The current well is in the house. It's in the basement of the house, I assume?
Yes.
The new well would be outside the 100-foot buffer up gradient of the leach area, which is good, and anyone that's been out there, I think you'll see the well's already been installed, the new well, right?
Yes.
There's really no other spot to put the well and septic on the lot. Instead of more planning as mitigation, if they want to do an IA treatment for the septic, I'd consider that mitigation for the larger amount of hardscape. Or they would need to update their planning mitigation to at least 370 square feet. And she said she was going to let you know of those comments, I assume. Did she communicate with you on that?
She may have communicated with one of the other people on my staff. I didn't get it personally, but a few of us have been in and out over the last few days, so it may have come in. I'm sure Amy sent it out. It just didn't reach me. So
Okay.
I'm sure we'd find a way to get to that square footage of mitigation. There is, a few small areas we might be able to, reduce a little bit of the existing driveway and get some more mitigation in that area. But that would make sense to us if the commission so choose. We would gladly find a way to get that area of mitigation on the plan and back to Amy.
Okay. Amy, anything else you'd like to add?
Just a couple of things. Karen, I've been having some issues with my email the past few days. A couple people have said that they haven't gotten things that I have sent, and it seems to be an internal error on our end, so I apologize if you didn't get it. It would be the same for your next hearings, the 2-to-1 mitigation for work in the 50 to 100. As per our regulations, which were adopted in 2020, we require 2-to-1 for any new hardscape in the 50 to 100, 3-to-1 if you're in the 50. So those have been in place. Mr. Chair, because this is such a small amount of additional hardscape and a small amount of mitigation, if the commission was satisfied, they could provide a revised plan prior to our next meeting if you saw fit to approve, kind of pending that additional small amount of mitigation prior to the order of conditions in a couple of weeks. I would have no issue with that. I know there are some interested neighbors for this property, just wanting to make sure, being very cognizant of how close the septic and everything is to this wetland plus Robbins Pond. People were concerned, wanting to make sure there was adequate separation to groundwater with the new system. People had asked if it was a raised system, which the plan shows a little bit of fill around it. So maybe Kieran can speak to that, or just definitely make sure we hear comments from the audience when we're done. But provided we can get to that 370 square feet of mitigation, I would be in favor of approval.
Okay, all right, thank you.
If I could just answer the
Sure,
question about the
please.
septic system.
Yeah.
There is, as you can see from the plans, there's a septic system across the road. That is right at the edge of the 50-foot buffer. That one is lower by a substantial amount than what we're proposing. What we're proposing is, the front yard right now along Shore Drive is at a kind of a steep slope. So the northerly end, or the area towards Cahoon Road, will be buried under the ground at grade. But as the grade drops down, the septic is going to be level. So what we've done is brought in a couple of feet of fill on the southerly end, just to balance that out. So the yard is going to look basically flat, as opposed to have the steep drop that it has right now. It's not going to look like a mounded system or a walled system from the road as you drive by. It'll look just more like a flat lawn than what it is right now. There is a retaining wall up against the existing driveway. That's not going to be modified. And that's well away, that's about 15 feet away from the septic system. So we don't expect any issues or any concerns in that area. The elevation of the wetlands is down approximately 14 feet below the septic system. So we don't expect any issues either there with leaching into the groundwater. I mean, ultimately septic systems do drain down all the way down into it, but the more separation you have, the better cleansing the sand and the soil will do of the nitrogen and the other pathogens that would go down into the groundwater.
Okay, all right, good, thank you. Comments from Commissioners. Wayne?
No, I just have one question. Maybe I'm a little confused. I see a proposed well up near the corner there, Cahoon Road,
Yes.
and then you have the other well down by the pond.
The well near Cahoon is the proposed well that just got installed.
Oh, it did, that's the one that just got
That's the one,
installed.
yeah.
Okay, all right.
The,
that-
the other well is actually inside the building, and that's going to be
Oh.
removed.
What is the one down here between Shore Drive and the pond? It says
That's
well there.
That's the abutters well. That's
Oh,
not.
it's the abutters well, okay. Thank you for clearing that up for me.
No?
I think it looks good. Spent a lot of time there years ago with the guy, the previous owner, Mr. Wright. It's a very small lot. The Magnolia Pines were all very small lots in there, and they've done a good job fitting it all in place, and I think it will be a nice improvement.
John?
Yeah, my only question is about the proximity of the septic system to multiple abutters wells. And Amy doesn't really address that in her comments, and I don't know whether it's in our purview to consider that. It's just a question of whether that's an issue here or not. I'd love it if Amy would speak up about that.
That would be, as far as abutters,
Well, like the
That
one
would be
across
more-
the street that's
that would
55
be-
feet away.
that would be more a question for the Board of Health, who has a regulation of distance between wells and septic systems. This is a redevelopment, if you will. So as far as you have to comply to the greatest extent practical, but I would defer to the Board of Health for the questions about whether or not the proximity is adequate or not.
And we will have to file with the Board of Health. It
Right.
won't-
Okay, thank you. That was my only thing.
Stan?
I have nothing.
Okay. Yeah, I tried to see if there was some other way you could situate that, locate this leach field on this lot. Even if you turned it sort of southwest, I guess, and tilted it toward the house down and moved it more to the south, it would get it farther away from the adjacent abutters well. Still wouldn't be outside that 100-foot requirement that I think the health department would be looking for. And it might move it a little bit closer to the wetland, but and I'm not a hydrologist, but the abutters well is, I assume, downslope from where the leaching field will be, right?
Actually, it's pretty flat as it goes. I mean, the road itself drops down considerably.
Yeah.
But as you go straight across the street, it's kind of a consistent slope going down to the low spot. So that area where the 55 feet is written, that's pretty flat as it goes across the street, but it continuously goes down the street.
Okay. All right, good. So let me ask if there are any questions from attendees here. Yes, sir. If you'd step to the podium and introduce yourself.
My name is Steve Churchill, 17 Shore Drive. We are concerned about the septic system and the well. This is Jonathan Randall, my neighbor, whose well is in question, being that close to the septic system. Now, the other thing that we're concerned about is the well itself is only 120 feet and 8 inches from the pond. Now, and I've learned today that it is not gonna be a raised system or a totally enclosed system. And I'm concerned I have no information on the perk test, which I would like, if you have that. I would like to know how deep they're gonna go and how much sand is between the septic, the leaching field, and the clay. Because if there isn't enough, it's gonna leak into the pond, and you can't get blue back. You already have it in Harwich Conservation. We've never had an issue in the pond, and we don't want one now. I'm not trying to, that house needs to be redone. I knew the owner. So I'm not trying to prevent that. I'm just trying to prevent any problems in the future with the pond and my neighbor Jonathan as well. So that's it. Again, I thought it might be high, a raised system, and it's not gonna be. They're gonna actually raise the ground level. But I don't know how deep they're going and how much sand is below it to the clay, because it ain't gonna drain in clay. It's gonna drain off downhill, which is the pond.
Right. I can respond to your second issue with respect to its location, 120 feet to the pond, and our resource area is essentially 100 feet. So outside of that 100-foot buffer, if you will, then we don't have a say as to whether 120 feet is good or 130 feet is better or what.
So there is no, like, measurement for that off a pond?
100 feet.
100 feet?
Yep.
Just like a well?
Yep.
And that's only, from Jonathan's well, it's only gonna be
Well, the issue,
55 feet.
yeah, the issue with respect to the wells is, I think as Amy mentioned, that's a health department issue.
Yes.
So I don't think we can address that here.
But, so that's gonna get kicked over to the Board of Health to another meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't
And the
know.
abutters will get a notice?
Yes.
Yes, it would be a
Okay.
public meeting, just like this one.
Yeah.
Karen, do you want to respond to any of those?
I can say for sure that when we did the perk test, we did not see any clay, because the town has another regulation about you gotta have 10 feet under the system above clay. So there wasn't any clay found when we did our test bits. The septic system we were proposing, even though it's not a mounded system, it's going to be higher than the system that's across the street, that is much closer to the pond. So I'm not saying that makes it all right, but I'm just saying that we're gonna have a better level of treatment of the sand underneath that area than the one that's already there across the street. The septic system we're just replacing a septic system, and currently the one that's there is underneath the driveway. So the bottom of the one that's underneath the driveway is probably within a couple of feet of the wetlands. We're hoping to be about, between 8 and 10 feet of separation between the bottom and that edge of wetlands, so that's gonna be substantially better treatment of the, anything coming out of that septic system.
All right.
Did I hear him say there was 10 feet of sand between the system and the clay? Is that what I heard? No?
No, the town has a regulation that says you need to have 10 feet underneath a system before you get to clay.
Okay.
And when we did our test holes, we did not find any clay
Really?
when we dug down, because we're a little bit higher. The ground where we dug the septic system, excuse me, is it okay if I respond in this manner?
Please, yeah.
The ground where we dug the septic system was around elevation 45, 46, and the edge of wetlands is down elevation 31. So approximately, the ground is 15 feet higher. So when we dug a 10 to 12-foot hole, we didn't get down to the wetland, and we didn't find clay when we dug that hole.
And now, I have one other question that doesn't really pertain to this, but is the builder, Richard Tupper, going to occupy this or resell this? Because I got the word today that it might be for resale.
That's really outside of our purview.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to answer it, you can, otherwise, I think that's
As
All right.
I
I'm
don't
just
have
concerned.
I don't have knowledge of what that is. I know that he's bought the building. The way he's talked to me about it is implied he's
Okay.
living there, but I
So we
can't say.
really don't know the answer to that. That's all right. He had told me he may down the line. So that's my concern, is the septic. Jonathan's is a fully contained system. Now, it's across the street, and it's closer to the pond. So we are very concerned about the pond. You can't, if you make a mistake now, there's no going back. And I've been there since we had a mash tent in the 50s. And before electricity, we had gas lights. So we are concerned about the pond. that's all. I'm not trying to stop them from rebuilding. God knows it needs to be done. We got a few more being done in there. But we are concerned about the quality of life in there and at the pond. That's
enough.
all.
Any
Thank
other-
you very much.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments?
I'm Jonathan Randall. I live across the street from the property at One Shore. I'm at Four Shore. And I also appreciate the project that Mr. Tupper has in place. It needs a lot of care, it needs a lot of work, but I'm just concerned about the septic system in protecting the pond. I would like to know it's enclosed. That's just my own concern, to keep the pond.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? All right. So it sounds like we have some additional work as far as mitigation.
Correct. Would the commission feel appropriate to go forward tonight with the addition, as Amy had mentioned, about just giving a plan in that would have that square footage of mitigation on it?
No, I think we want to continue the hearing with, and have you come back to us, showing us where the additional mitigation would be, what you plan on putting in that area and that sort of thing as well. I don't think, unless anybody's comfortable with this tonight, I don't think we're really at that position.
I think, didn't, go ahead. Amy did mention that they could come back. I believe she did. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is that correct, Amy? That if we voted
It
tonight?
said, I had said because it was such a small, a relatively small amount of additional space, about 100 and, what was it, 85 square feet, and you had to find another 200 square feet, that I would be comfortable if that was the only thing, that you move on the project tonight, but prior to next meeting, which is when you do the orders of conditions, so a week from now, that they would provide a revised plan showing that additional mitigation, which the commission would see. So I would be comfortable with you moving on the project tonight conditionally. However, if you wanted to continue to have another hearing on this for that purpose, it would be September 21st.
John?
I don't see any reason to put this off. I don't think anything is gonna change between now and then, as long as we condition it, as Amy suggests, on the required amount of remediation. I'd be willing to make a motion to just do it now.
Okay. Let me ask, Amy, one of your suggestions was to do an IA treatment on the septic? Is that something which you'd be interested
An
in?
IA system, IA treatment, I'll add in the mitigation plantings. The mitigation plantings would make most sense to me because the IA system is expensive, and the mitigation will do, to increase that buffer will be something worthwhile as well, so. We
Okay,
are taking that shed out of there, which is the only structure that's less than the 50 feet. So mitigating that area and some additional area, I think will be good.
okay, all right.
Just another comment, Mr. Chairman, is IA system, the issue in the pond is phosphorus, not
Understood.
nitrogen. The IA
Understood.
system isn't gonna do anything about the phosphorus. And I'm sure the pond neighbors are concerned about the phosphorus that would go into the pond that would make things irretrievable. I'm not sure it's quite that dire, but I don't know what good an IA system would do here anyway.
Okay.
So I wouldn't be, I don't know, unless Amy has something to add, something I'm missing here. It's not gonna do anything about the phosphorus.
Okay, all right, good. You want to make a motion then?
I'll move to approve the notice of intent for One Shore Drive, map 78, parcel B10, with the condition that the applicant's return prior to the order of conditions being issued with a modified plan that includes, what is the number, 370 square feet of mitigation. And also, we should add our standard, no fertilizer, no chemicals, non-chemicals, organic or otherwise to be applied anywhere within the 100-foot buffer, which I believe includes most of this lot.
Okay.
I'll
Yep.
second it.
You have a second?
Go ahead.
I'll second it, yeah.
All right, Alan seconds it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members.
So you work with Amy on the resubmission then. Great. Good, thank you very much.
Point of information,
Yes?
so is that a done deal, or does that have to go to the Board of Health now?
No, from conservation perspective, it's been approved, but they still have to go through the Board of Health for approvals. Yes,
And we will get notified?
yes.
Okay.
Yep.
That's all I want to know. Thank you very much.
All right. Next item on the agenda is notice of intent for 3 Mark Lane, map 30, parcel G5-3 for a new dwelling.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. For the record, again, my name is Kieran Healy. I'm a land surveyor with the BSC Group, representing the owner of the property, Mr. Dan Minto. This is a wooded lot that we're looking to put in a single-family, 3-bedroom dwelling on it. We have shown the edge of the wetlands, the 50-foot buffer and the 100-foot buffer. We had done some perk tests out there for the septic system, and on test pit number 1, which is outside the 100-foot buffer, we found some clay down at a level that was less than what's allowed by the town of Harwich Board of Health. So as a result, we had to relocate the septic system to the west, which puts it less than 100 feet to the wetlands. The closest corner is 86.4 feet to the wetland. You can see by the slopes that it's well above the existing wetland elevation, with the ground in this area approximately 26, and the elevation of the wetlands down at 11.5 to 12. On this one, we are proposing an IA septic system because we are less than the 100-foot to the wetlands with this, and as it's new construction, this was something that we felt would allow us to go forward. We meet the requirements of Title V with the septic system, and the only reason we're in, as I say, in this location is because the town has an additional regulation about having 10 foot of separation between the bottom of the system and clay. Other than that, we're proposing a single-family dwelling. We're proposing some dry wells to collect any runoff. We're proposing grading on the side of the building, and you can see where the straw water line is. It's approximately 70 feet from the edge of the wetlands. It's a little unusual in that it's a wooded site, so there's no real space to mitigate.
Right.
You know, we can't cut something down to plant something.
Right.
So we tried to just do the minimum around the house where we can, and keep at the 70 foot, and then just do minimal grading at the rear of the house. Keep the house as much as possible. It's unusual in that the house is entirely outside of the 100-foot buffer, and in this particular case, it's the septic system that's within. But as I mentioned, it's as a result of the Town of Harwich Board of Health regulation regarding clay. Other than that, I'd be glad to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, good, thank you. Let me just read Amy's comments on this. She says this abuts the same wetland as the next hearing for 116 Sisson Road. It's an isolated vegetated wetland. It's not within map priority or estimated habitats of rare species. It's a vacant lot. Closest point of the new structure to the wetland is 100 feet, which is good. The Board of Health will not allow a leaching component of the septic within the 100-foot wetland buffer. They do not grant variances and will not allow IA treatment if they can locate a traditional Title V outside of the 100-foot buffer, which they could on this lot. So Amy says they've made the applicant aware of this, and they still wish to go forward with this application to us and to the Board of Health. And in order to minimize the impact to the buffer zone here, they would locate the leach area outside the 100 feet and bring the limit of work in tighter, even with the house itself currently being proposed just outside the 100-foot buffer. The limit of work comes all the way into the 66.8 feet from the wetland, so all that area between 66 and 100 could be cleared if approved as proposed. So there's no room for mitigation on this site. Option 1 is to minimize disturbance. Option 2 is to provide off-site mitigation. provided the proposed work on this site is proven not to have an adverse impact on the wetlands and its interests. Or option 3 is the payment of fees in lieu of mitigation, which we just recently approved in the past, at the last town meeting.
Okay.
So she says that we'll let the applicant know of her comment. They've submitted their wetland delineation data sheets, and she concurs with the delineation of the wetland for this, and the next application is it's the same. So those are the comments. Anything you'd like to add to that, Amy?
Yes, please. I wasn't aware that the reason that they located the septic where they did was because they found clay outside the 100-foot buffer zone. I don't know how that will play into the Board of Health's decision to grant a variance for work in the 100-foot, or for putting a leach in the 100-foot. So we'll see how that goes. Excuse me. For this project, there's no structure other than the leach, if you will, that is within the 100-foot buffer. So as far as in lieu fees, I don't think that one makes sense because we base it on structural square footage. What I would recommend is that you minimize your limit of work greater. Bring it maybe up to the edge of grading where your contour is. If I can, excuse me, I'm gonna scroll over to my other page here and zoom in. The best option, I do appreciate that you've minimized, but there is still a fair swath of the 50 to 100-foot buffer that you'd be clearing. So my recommendation would be that you bring the limit of work in tighter and bring it to the, I think you have a 24-foot contour line if I'm reading it right. Kind of on the back side of the building to the left of the proposed deck here. You have where the dry well is, and then you have a couple of contour lines. On that lower contour line, I'd recommend you bring the limit of work into there. And then other than that, something that one of the commissioners mentioned to me today, and we can definitely look at that, is do you actually have a coastal bank here, even though it's so far inland? In this case, I would say that the flood zone is really, you have your bordering vegetated wetland above your flood level, and I do think your delineation is correct. But I think by definition, you might technically have a coastal bank here as well.
If I could just respond to the coastal bank issue, I do a lot of work on the coastal banks, and basically if you've got 4 feet between contours, once you're above the flood zone line, you don't have a coastal bank. There are certain areas here that are literally down to 4 feet 3 inches and 4 feet 5 inches between contours, so they look close, but we did go through it quite a bit and follow that elevation between 12 and 13 all the way around, just to be sure that there was no coastal bank. And if you look right down to the middle where it says flood zone X and flood zone AE11, just to the right of the flood zone X, there's a circle right there. That circle is actually a 2-foot diameter circle, 2-foot radius circle, a 4-foot diameter circle, just to show how close it is, but that we are more than 4 feet between the contours in this area, and as a result, we don't have a coastal bank.
Thank you, Karen, I appreciate that.
All right, comments from the commissioners, Wayne?
I agree with Amy. It looks like they just gotta redesign this a little bit and pull that leach field away from that wetland as much as they can.
Alan? John?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you addressed the coastal bank thing. I'm a little unconvinced at this point. But I don't have anything to say about it. I wasn't aware of that particular detail, that it's 4 feet between contours, and that looks really close, and it's not clear to me that's the closest place they come to, but we've run into the coastal bank issues with several other applications recently, and it becomes a little bit difficult to deal with in cases like this. So that was my question, and it applies not just to this lot, but the other one. And the question is that true about the contours for the Cicero lot as well? You recall, did you put your 4-foot circle on that plan as well?
I did, yes, and we the 4-foot circle there is a graphical representation, but with part of our computer software is we can show where the slopes are. When it's below the flood zone, it's a 10-to-1 slope. When it's above the flood zone, it's a 25-to-1 slope. So with our software, we can just turn on what those elevations are, so we can see very visually where there is a coastal bank and where there's not. And the circle actually was left on just by something I was checking on. You know, we don't normally show the circle to the commission, but we just calculated this. But in this particular case, it's there, and it just shows exactly where we have that lack of a coastal bank above the flood zone.
Okay, thank you.
Stan?
I don't have any additional comments.
Okay. So I echo Amy's comment, too, about the limit of work. I think that if you can pull that in, probably about 15 feet from where it is right now, that'll reduce the amount of clearing that will have to take place on the lot. And reduce the mitigation, too, obviously. She's suggesting it be pulled in close to the, I think it's the 24 or 25-foot contour line that comes around from the east side of the house around to the south side.
Yeah, that would be about approximately 12 feet from where the straw wattle is right now to the toe of that slope.
Okay.
I have no, I can go back to my clients, I'm sure they won't have a problem pulling the entire straw wattle line in 12 feet off of the, where it is today.
Yep.
Just pushing that in 12 feet. Now, the reason I say 12 and not 15 is because when they grade the toe of that slope, they need a little bit of room for equipment. And I don't want to say it's 14 and I need 13 or something along those lines. So if we could go at 12 feet and put in the straw wattle at that map, then that would give them the space to do that bit of grading with their machines and get it in there.
Okay. But it would also reduce the associated clearings that you would
Yes.
need to.
Yes.
The, just for your information, your client's information, the in lieu mitigation fee is calculated at a cost of $4 per square foot of mitigation. So if you have 100 square feet, then it would be $400, obviously. So anything that you can
So
do.
if there's
to-
no mitigation, I'm sorry, if there's no mitigation space available on site,
No, it's all
then you have to
native
pay-
property, yeah.
then it has to be paid for off-site.
Either that, or if you have other property in town that you could put the mitigation on, that would be acceptable as well. The third option is in lieu of fees.
Yeah, there is.
Mr. Chairman, if I may?
Yes,
So it's based on square footage of structure that's proposed in the 50 to 100 foot buffer zone. They're not proposing any structure in, they're just proposing the leach area partially in, but no portion of the house or deck within the 100 foot buffer. So actually the mitigation calculation for in lieu fees wouldn't work here. So it's because essentially it's not calculated by the square footage of clearing, it's calculated by the square footage of new structure that they're proposing.
but we also have the clearing that's taking place on this lot as well, Amy.
Right, but that is not a factor in our calculation that we approved.
Okay,
We only factored in square footage of new structure. We can certainly address that some other time,
yeah,
but we only looked at square footage of new structure. So that's why I mentioned pulling the limit of work in as tight as we can. And I think the 12 feet will go a long way to minimizing disturbance in the 100.
okay. All right, good news then. All right, good.
And then I would, I guess, defer, really the Board of Health has the regulation of whether or not a leach field can be within the 100 foot buffer. I don't have the knowledge behind whether or not, it would be appropriate to put it outside the 100 foot buffer where you have a lot of clay, or locate it where it is, which kind of straddles the 100 foot buffer zone line. So I would recommend approval of where it is, but if the Board of Health changes that, then they would obviously have to come back to the Conservation Commission with a revised plan. But, so my only recommendation would be to pull that limit of work in as tight as they can at this time.
Okay, all right, good,
And I'd want to see a revised plan for that.
all right. So it sounds like we would do a continuance on this?
Sure. As the board, just so I have proper marching orders, is 12 feet acceptable to the board for where it is today, to where we slide in?
Pulling it back in?
Yep, put it back in 12 feet.
Any comments?
Yeah.
Anybody comfortable with that?
So at this time, that's the only thing that we're looking to change?
Appears to be.
Okay. Again, if the commission was so inclined, I can, make the guarantee that I would produce a plan to Amy before the next hearing, so that it would show a line that was 12 feet inside of what's there today.
Okay.
So we
Alright.
wouldn't have to
If
come back
I may, sorry. I'd like to have a chance to speak with the health director a little bit more about this. Kieran, maybe you'd like to sit in with me about the location of the leach area and as it pertains to, why you stated you can't get it outside the 100-foot buffer zone. I think that might expedite the process for, well, at least through the Board of Health, if we could have a sit down. I don't know if you've already had one with Katie or not.
I have not, but I would be glad to meet both of you. Anytime next week, I can be available.
Okay.
So to that, and I think I would recommend a continuance to the next meeting, instead of approving, having a plan submitted. I could very well have draft orders ready anyways for the next meeting if all goes smoothly, but I would recommend an actual continuance for this one
All right.
to September 21st.
That date work for you, Karen? The 21st?
Yes.
Good. Can we have a motion then to,
Mr. Chair,
yes?
are there any applicants from?
Yes, sir.
Please speak on.
I was just gonna say,
Absolutely,
that's
my
what I was
apologies for not
asking.
asking you. Thank you. If you'd move to the podium and introduce yourself, sir?
My name's Stephen Mazur. I'm the owner of 10 Mark Lane, along with my wife Nancy, which is directly across the street from this parcel. It's very disappointing that this is going on, because when we bought the house, which she'll explain to you, 22 years ago, this was wetlands and not sellable over here. We've done some things, the town of Harwich has, by putting in a catch basin down at the bottom of the driveway, of my driveway, on that side, because the puddling of pond water and rain and all that shit, oh, excuse me. And, but it's all covered up by vegetation. And when they went in to do their perk tests, they went right in over it, and I don't know what they did to it after, for damage and stuff like that. I'm not used to speaking in front of people, so.
All right.
It's just very disappointing that this is gonna happen. I haven't even had a chance to look at any plans. I'm in the business myself, but I'm gonna let my wife carry on this conversation a little bit. I'm just very disappointed that this has gone this far, but
Okay.
that's me.
All right, thank you.
Hi, my name is Nancy Laws Mazur, and I have something that I would like to read to you tonight. And at the end of my reading, I'd like to pass some photographs around to you.
You want me to hand those over? Do that?
Not yet.
Oh, not yet.
22 years ago, my husband and I purchased our house on 10 Mark Lane in Harwich. One of the reasons we were interested in this property was because of the woods across the street. First, we were told it possibly was conservation land, or at least for sure unbuildable. Later, we learned that it belonged to the family of the 1850s house on the corner of Mark Lane and Alum Street, and they had no intention of selling it, at least not in the near future. As families go, there was pressure to put 3 of the lots up for sale. We, as the rest of our neighbors, were in disbelief. And there's only, let's see, is it 5 houses? houses on our street? 5 houses on the street, and 10, number 10, number 6, and number 4 are actually the 3 houses that face this piece of property. So, anyway, we, as the rest of our neighbors, were in disbelief. There was even talk of pooling our money together to buy the 1.44 acre parcel so we could keep it as is. It has become our little bit of peace and serenity, and quite honestly, a noise buffer from traffic noise on Sisson Road. I guess our disappointment comes from getting attached to something that wasn't ours in the first place. For us, the sad part will be seeing the land stripped naked, everything bulldozed to a pulp, so another house can be put in its place. I'd like to read a few excerpts from 3 articles from the Cape Cod Chronicle. The first is by Kristen Andrus, and they portray exactly how I feel, and I'm sure most of the neighbors on our street. To improve their property, some new owners, and I'll add builders/developers, strip away native vegetation and organics, and then bring in soil from somewhere else, put in irrigation and turf lawn with a few shrubs so that it looks like the suburbs from which most of us washed ashore. Retaining native vegetation wherever possible helps us preserve the Cape's sense of place. Some people cut down 40-year-old pitch pines trees because they don't like the needles that drop. Pitch pines have been on the Cape for 9,000 years, according to pollen records. The pines are well adapted to our poor sandy soils and to wildfires. They are part of the dwindling pitch pine oak barren ecosystem. Others cut down 40-year-old oak trees because they don't like the leaves that fall. Of the many values of trees, oaks in particular support the greatest diversity of insects that are critical bird food. Acorns feed dozens of animal species, and fallen leaves protect and feed the oil organisms that help plants grow. The loss of an oak tree's decades of ecological existence is notable when, for most of us, these values cannot be recouped in our lifetime. This is from Mary Richmond's article. If you were just walking by woods, you might think nothing much was happening. If you stop to look and listen, however, you would have seen and heard proof that it was a very busy place indeed. Most of nature isn't rowdy. It is quiet, subtle, going about its business all around us. If we are alert and observant, we will notice activity everywhere we go. Even in the midst of a serious drought, nature is active and very much alive. If you've ever been near a lot that is being cleared for development, you know it is far from empty. The trees groan when cut, the squirrels, chipmunks, raccoons, rabbit, deer, fox, and coyotes scream while they attempt to flee the giant, loud machines that destroy their homes and often kill or maim them as well. All of the damage and death goes uncounted by those that stand around counting the money that they'll make from developing the land. But those of us who love these places, these animals and trees, we know exactly what was lost, and we cry every time it happens. On Mark Lane, we've had the opportunity to see more of the natural habitat on Cape Cod because of the woods across from our houses. On any given day, we never know what might tiptoe out of the woods to entertain us with their splendor. Our neighbor next door has bird feeders which attract at least a dozen species of native birds. At times, I've called her to say, look out your front window to see turkeys or deer eating along with the birds. We can even pick out hummingbirds in our tall oak trees, waiting for the moment to swoop down on our feeder. To be fair, I read up on why developers and builders strip all trees and vegetation from plots of land on which to build new homes. Not surprised, it's mostly for efficiency to save time and money. And a few little trees and landscaping at the end can be added to their budget in the end. But noted, by making the effort to save existing trees can immediately buffer noise, severe winds, give more privacy, provide shade to help with cooling, and add thousands of dollars to the overall property value. Because of the nearby wetlands and the 1.44 acre size of the property, I'm hoping you will find it in your heart and conscience to protect the beauty of the property as much as you can. And for the sake of future projects on smaller parcels, use it to your advantage. Make a legacy for yourself as being known as a builder/developer who saves mature trees and native vegetation. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Any other comments? Would you like to respond?
I guess I would respond by saying that now that we have moved the straw water line 12 feet inland, shall we say, from the wetland, over, just by rough eye, I would say approximately 3/4 of this piece of land is going to be undeveloped. It's going to be in the conservation area where we can't touch. So the amount of disturbance is going to decrease rapidly. We also turned the house so that the narrower portion, the gable, is generally facing, is generally parallel to the street. Sorry, it's generally perpendicular to the street. In this case, it's parallel. So the amount of footprint that our house will be seen from the street will be decreased somewhat from normal. Basically, we turned it 90 degrees. So there are a few things about this that, will make it hopefully a little bit more palatable to the neighbors. It's not a huge development. It's a single-family, 3-bedroom home. The house is assessed and taxed as a developable lot. My clients purchased a lot and they're looking to build a home. So there will be disturbance, there's no question about that, but I can speak to the owner and talk to him about possibly looking to save some additional trees in that front corner where we're not doing any grading, but that's, it's approximately 150 feet from the wetlands. It's outside the jurisdiction, but I would still have the discussion with the owner and see if that can be done.
Wonderful, good.
Yeah, I understand that the whole lot probably and hopefully won't be bulldozed, but like I said in my last paragraph, for future, parcels of land that may be developed, they should just really keep that in mind, that there's a lot of good that can come out of it.
Granted.
So,
Right.
my husband just took a picture of this about 12 hours ago. It's,
About 4 hours ago.
4 hours ago?
Yeah.
Okay, it's a doe and her fawn, exactly on top of where the
Can I
perk
ask you to
test
speak
was done.
into the microphone, or if you have anything more, just speak into the microphone if you would. Thank you.
This was taken late this afternoon. It's a picture of a doe and a fawn right on the piece of property that the perk test was done on. And I also have, you can keep my letter if you'd like. You can keep the photographs because they're all duplicates. But it's pictures over the years of all the animal life that we've taken pictures of. And it's deer, it's coyotes, it's rabbits, raccoons, turkeys, you name it. And it's just a shame that they're all gonna be run out. So,
Well, we'll add those into the file, and it will be part of the public record then.
did you get one of those? Yes, and these are all the pictures, including what it looks like. That's not. Right, that's another one.
Mr. Chair, if I may,
Yes, Amy?
just, if any neighbors, any interested parties want to see copies of the plans, you're more than welcome to email me. My email is online on the town webpage. We can send that over, or we can make you a copy of the plan. Sounds like there's gonna be a revision to tighten up that limit of work, so there's less disturbance, so let's give it a few days. But we're always perfectly happy to share anything with people who are interested, so that they understand a little bit better, other than just an abutter notification of what would be happening adjacent to them.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so can we have a motion, please, to continue this to the meeting of the 21st.
Make a motion that we continue the plan for 3 Mark Lane, map 30, parcel G5-3 until 9/21/22.
Second, please. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries, so we will see you in 2 weeks then, on this one. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is a notice of intent for Would you mind, could we ask you to take that outside, please? Thank you. Next item is notice of intent for 16 Sisson Road, a new dwelling on map 30, parcel G5-4.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. For the record, again, my name is Kieran Healy. I'm a land surveyor with the BSC Group. We're proposing a single-family home at this vacant piece of property at number 116 Sisson Road, also known as Route 39. This is the same wetland. On the north side of this property, you can see the back of the parcel we just spoke about on 3 Mark Lane. In this particular case, we're looking to put in a 4-bedroom dwelling. Portion of it is within the 50 to 100 foot buffer. The closest corner of the deck to the resource area is 85 feet. The house itself is just under the 100 feet of where the garage meets the house. That is approximately 97 feet. So we pushed the house as close to the street as possible, allowing us to put the septic system up in that front area so that it's in front of the house, between the house and the wetland, should I say. Other than that, it's just a straightforward dwelling with a simple driveway, turnout, because Sisson Road is quite fast. We have a little turnout in that front area outside of the conservation jurisdiction, but it's important for us to be able to turn in that area, so we're driving onto Sisson as opposed to trying to pass onto it. As I said, the septic system is also in front. We tried to limit the grading. You can see on the left-hand side, we've got very little grading on that side. We're just trying to tie into the existing grading as quick as we can. And on the right-hand side, because of the garage, we have to put a little bit more grading on that area so we can build up the ground around the garage just to protect that. The deck is reasonable in size. I guess other than that, I'd be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you. Amy's comments. Within the 100-foot buffer, there's proposed to be a deck with stairs, a bulkhead, and a few feet of the back of the house and grading. The wetland is, again, an isolated vegetated wetland. Limit of work is proposed to be 70.4 feet from the wetland. They're proposing 308 square feet of new structure in the 50 to 100, with the closest point of the new structure to the wetland at 85.2, which is off of the stairs on the deck. No mitigation is proposed. We would require 2 to 1, or at least 616 square feet. We suggest they consider minimizing the impact in the buffer by pulling structures as far away as possible, decreasing size of the work limit, etc. For this particular case, Amy's thinking that they could change the design a bit by moving the deck stairs to the side of the deck, so the closest distance to the wetland would be about 90 feet instead of 85. This would also allow them to pull the work limit in a bit closer. Limits of work on sides of the property as they approach the rear could also be pulled in, as after the project is finished, this area generally stays yard area for the owner. And mitigation for the project could also be considered an installation of an IA septic system potentially. As a last resort, we've discussed the in lieu fees for mitigation, but only if the project has no impact on the wetland resource, and 2, all of the mitigations options have been exhausted. Property is not within map priority or estimated habitat of rare species, and she does not have any recommendations rather for us at this point in time. Amy, anything you would like to add to that?
Kind of similar to the last part, just echoing minimizing as much as possible, bringing that limit of work in, reorientating, the deck stairs, or making the deck a little bit less wide and closer, maybe longer, but not as wide. And then the mitigation piece, you have 300 and something square feet of new structure and within the 100-foot buffer to mitigate for. We could do it in a couple of different ways, such as we've mentioned, putting IA technology in for the septic system potentially, or by if you had offsite and any opportunity to do offsite mitigation on a different property, or as a last resort, prove it if it's proven that this project won't have any adverse impact to the isolated wetlands, that we could assess fees at a 4-to-1 ratio, which would be roughly $1,200 plus. Those fees would go towards us restoring wetlands and buffer zones in other parts of the town. But first, we don't always jump right to that. The first thing we do is look to minimize. So those would be my comments.
Okay. All right, thank you. Comments from the commissioners, Wayne?
No, I don't have any comments on this. Looks pretty simple, except for moving that stairway, maybe that's.
Okay. Al?
No comments.
John?
No comment.
Stan? All right, yeah, I pretty much agree with what Amy is saying. As far as pulling in the limit of work on this, it looks like it'd be difficult to do, given the grading that you're gonna be proposing behind the garage and the space you need off the deck to move equipment through there too, right?
Correct. You'll see that the only grading we're really proposing at the back is just to build up around the garage. As soon as we were able to get away from that, we turned it right into the building again. So we tried to minimize the grading in this particular case. Moving the stairway to the side, absolutely no problem. We can gladly do that. The only reason we had it in this location was if you have it on the side facing the garage, you have that steep hill coming into it. If you have it on the side facing the bulkhead, then the bottom of the stairs are interfering with the access to the bulkhead. So that's the only reason we have it facing out. But we'll find a way to make it work on the bulkhead side if the commission so choose.
Okay. And so in line with the comments that we heard with the last presentation from Mark Lane, your limit of work, for example, on the southern side of the lot comes to a point right alongside the boundary. Can that be sort of curved in as opposed to going all the way to the side of the boundary and cutting directly across?
Something in this manner right here?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can definitely do that.
I mean, as much as you could there. I know you have a little grading on the side of the house that extends out probably 10 feet or something like that, right?
This right here is the 100-foot buffer.
Yeah.
So all this area is outside of the 100.
Yeah.
But we can definitely turn the line like this right here.
Yeah, I'm just thinking with respect to having to disturb existing vegetation and that sort of a thing, whether inside or outside of the 100 feet would be, I think, a good thing as far as the neighbors are concerned. With that, I have no comments other than those that Amy has mentioned. So with respect to mitigation, do you have a recommendation on this, Amy? Or do you feel that, I mean, essentially, we can't do mitigation on the lot itself, so that either leaves us with mitigation off-site, and we're not talking a lot here either, or in lieu?
If I could,
I have suggestion that some of the area that's going to be that steep hillside in back of the garage, that area be a lot of that area going to the northeast side of the property line be replanted with native plantings. It doesn't look like that slope is going to be a really usable part of any type of yard area or anything like that. And if they could revegetate some of the area within the buffer, that would be advantageous, I would think.
that would be agreeable. I mean, we don't own, my clients don't own any other land off-site besides these two
Okay.
properties right here, so
Right.
that's kind of not really an option. But definitely we would, I mean, we need to grade that area anyway to stabilize it. So by planting it, if that would, you know, basically kill two birds with one stone, then I'm sure my clients would be perfectly fine with getting mitigation on that regraded slope.
Yeah, it sounds like the in lieu fees would be pretty close to what you spend on the plants, actually, for that.
Yep.
To redo it.
So if we could, right now, that's, right now.
I
the
was just
clo-
gonna say, I think it's better to do what you can on the site rather than have to do something elsewhere. So, I would wanna see a sketch of what those native plantings would be. I could certainly make some recommendations as well.
All right,
Right,
sorry.
right now, the back of the garage is approximately 98 feet from the wetlands, and where our current hay bale line is at 70 feet. Would it be acceptable to hold 15 feet off the garage and then just infill everything between the straw and and 15 foot off the back of the garage
With plantings?
with plantings?
Yeah.
See how close we can get to that number that we need.
Yeah. I think that sounds very reasonable. Would you like to see the planting plan in advance, Amy?
Yes.
Okay, so we have the other one coming back to this
For the first.
first, same thing with this one then?
Yes.
Okay, all right. good.
Hopefully it'd be pretty, hopefully it won't be too long, but, I think I'd like to see it formally.
Okay. Let me ask, are there any questions from anyone else in the audience? No, hearing none? Any other comments from commissioners? Okay, so it sounds like we need a motion for a continuance to the 21st.
And if I could, just to confirm, the three things that I'm going to do is I'm going to moving the hay bale line on the westerly side. I'm going to relocate the stairway to around the corner, so it's parallel to the wetland. And I'm going to regrade the area, so 15 feet off of the garage, so with mitigation plantings.
Right, and work with Amy to come up with a planting plan for that particular area. That sounds good. Can we have a motion on that then?
I'll move to continue, 116 Sisson Road, map 30, parcel G5-4 to September 21.
Okay, have a second, please?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members.
Thank you very much. All right, next item on the agenda is into order of conditions for 17 Indigo Lane. This was addition of a screened porch to an approved single-family dwelling. And you should have a copy of,
There's actually no amended conditions, if you will. The conditions all matched with what they needed to. It's really only page one of the or page one of the draft amendment with the new plan of record and date on it.
I'm sorry, you changed what date on it?
The plan of record date, it should have a revision date, and that will reflect the revised plan, which shows a smaller house than what was previously approved.
I see, okay. And the expiration date, however, on item number 12, that stays as September 3rd?
Yep, amendments don't prolong permits.
Okay. All right, good. So in this particular case, they're doing in lieu fees for the mitigation, Amy?
They already paid them because what they permitted was bigger than what they actually built. They paid the fee prior to building. So you actually got more fees, more mitigation, if you will, than what we would have actually required.
Okay. All right, good, thank you. Anyone have any comments or changes to this?
No.
Can we have a motion then, please?
I'll move to approve the amended order of conditions for 17 Indigo Lane, map 80, parcel D112.
Okay, can we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the amended order of condition carries. Next item is an order of conditions, once again amended, for addition of a stone patio to an approved renovation plan for 2261 Head of the Bay Road, map 119, parcel N-5. So again, the date has changed. There's a revision date on it then, Amy. You have three items here. Number 1 was revised to 8/9/22, and then you have 2 and 3 revised to 7/6/2022.
Correct, that reflects on above what the plans are, the land management plan, the landscape plan, and the site plan, I think. So item number 1 is a site plan, 2, and then underneath that, those dates reflect for those plans.
So the only one changing is the site plan.
No, we added the land management plan, because that wasn't a part of the previous filing, so that's new.
All right.
And then there are a few special conditions about, reporting, basically annual reporting. It's a pretty small invasive management project, so I didn't think twice a year was worth it. So I just put once annually. If anybody other than Wilkinson does the work, they have to kind of prove that they're capable of carrying out the land management plan as designed. Patio has to be pervious and things like that.
Okay. And this will require annual reporting as well.
Yep.
Okay, good. Anyone have any comments to this, changes?
No.
John, anything? Stan, you good? Okay, can we have a motion on this, please?
I'll make a motion, we grant the order of conditions for Catherine Suffolk Green at 2261 Head of the Bay Road, map 119, parcel N5, amendment to SE 32-2425.
Okay, we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Next item is request for a certificate of compliance for 15 Glen Dune Road, map 12, parcel X3-41 for gas remediation. This is part of the gas spill that took place, how many number of years ago was that? 3 years ago?
3 to 4. Just so the commission is aware, Chris Nitchie is available for questions or comments if you have them in regards to our findings on the soil analysis in the bare spot that was there. But I am recommending a cert of compliance for this. They found no contamination. It is a very thick layer of fines and detritus that's there, most likely suppressing some of the plant growth.
Okay. Good. Any comments or questions?
They seem to have satisfied with the question I had a while ago. They retested it and checked to make sure, and apparently they have.
Clean.
Yeah.
Good. John? All right, can we have a motion, please?
I'll make a motion that we issue the certificate of compliance for this project. It'd be TerraTech, 15 Glendon Road, map 12, parcel X3-41, SE number 32-2420.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good, motion carries. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is a certificate of compliance for 3 Hulse Point Road, map 6, parcel A2-4, additions and vegetation management. You want me to read this, Amy, or are you gonna?
I can do it quick, it's not a problem. It just took a little bit longer. This one had an extension because the vegetation they were having a hard time establishing. It's a tough spot. It's hot, dry, sunny, windy, salty, but they got the vegetation established for their mitigation. So I would recommend a certificate of compliance with this ongoing drought. So the commission knows, we've provided the water department with a list of properties that we've required mitigation for. And the water department will honor as long as it's temporary above ground drip, letting people continue to make sure that their mitigation plantings succeed by using that temp irrigation system. It's not anything for lawns or things like that. It's just the native plants. So I would recommend that you let them keep it in for another season or two and see where we're at, to make sure that those plants that they've attempted to plant a couple times actually do continue to survive.
So you're recommending another year extension on allowing the
No,
drip?
No extension, just an ongoing condition that allows them to have it for another year. We would put it in a letter form. So not an extension. We don't want to keep this permit, hold this permit up for them.
Okay, so we can just close this out then?
Yep, and I'll write a letter to, if you're comfortable with letting them keep the temp
Sure.
drip
All right.
for the mitigation plantings.
All right. Can we have a motion on this then, please?
I have a question,
Sure.
which is, what are the plants in question that are, did I miss you specifying what the plants are? Because some things will survive on their own once they get established, other things will just continue to struggle. So I'm just wondering if we're dripping water in there to eventually tell them to turn it off so the plants can die.
No, the plants that were picked were very drought tolerant native plants. They were beach plum, bayberry, Virginia rose, things like that. So I mean, if you took it out now, it still should be fine. They should have established by now, but I don't see the harm in giving them one more year, but just to make sure. But those are the native drought tolerant hardy plants that were put in.
Thank you.
Good with that?
I'll make a motion to approve the certificate of compliance for 3 Hulse Point Road, map 9, parcel A2-4, SE 32-2261, with the continuing condition that they are allowed to leave drip for another 2 years.
Only amendment being it to map 6, you said 9.
I did.
That's all
Sorry,
right.
okay, map 6.
Okay, can we have a second, please?
Second.
Seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. All right, good, that's the majority of the issues we have. Now we have a number of items on our agenda for discussion and possible vote. The first one being 2 Harvest Hollow, which is an ongoing issue that Lynn's been involved in. Welcome, wherever you'd like to.
Do you want me to just start, or do you want?
Yes, please, if you would.
Lynn Hamlin, representing the property owner. I was asked by the property owner to look at his site and, in reference to an enforcement issue, I don't even know if it's as far as an enforcement issue, but a question of an unpermitted picket fence in what was being determined to be the 0 to 50-foot buffer to a coastal bank. So I went out to the property, and I don't believe there is a coastal bank there. And one of the advantages of doing this for 30-plus years is you're either involved in or exposed to a lot of different kinds of decisions that come down the pike. I remember Wayne from when I was just trying to not throw up at a hearing. And this project actually reminded me of another project that I was aware of, and I wrote a letter, and I think my understanding of the DEP decision came from my telephone conversations with Jim Mahala, who was, you might have known him, he was a coastal geologist for DEP, and for a while he was the section chief. Since that time, and since I wrote you a letter, because Amy wanted the background information so she could assess my position from her own perspective, and I had a chance to review the whole file, town of Barnstable will email you the whole file, which I don't know whether or not it got forwarded to you. But it gave me a better understanding of how I can explain it to you better. So what the DEP decided, the case was, there was land subject to coastal storm flowage. So it was a slope that wasn't steep enough to be a vertical buffer or a landform that deposited sand into the coastal system. Those are the two, the ways a coastal bank is a coastal bank. And what had happened is waves, there was marine scarp that artificially created this steeper slope within land subject to coastal storm flowage. And the DEP determined that that artificial scarping by marine action did not then make a flood zone into a coastal bank. He went on to, and that was what I was interested in at the time, that project was to build a seawall. And the DEP's decision at the time was, when they built the seawall on what they determined was going to continue to be a flood zone, and they were disregarding the artificial scarp, that their determination was that bank and the riprap did not become a coastal bank in and of itself. You don't have to get that far, because on this property, they're not proposing any fill in this area, it's just the scarping. So I think even more applicable, or more, to feed my argument even better, this wasn't even a scarp made by natural phenomena. It's not wind or wave. It was as part of the farming practice for the cranberry bog. So when they came in and I don't know who he is, or I did know, but now I don't remember. But when he built that impoundment and he built the road around, he scarped out the landform, which put this artificial slope there. And if you look at it, it's denuded. So it clearly was just dug into the bank and doesn't seem to be establishing vegetation too well. So similar to a marine scarp that was not determined to be a coastal bank, this is not a coastal bank in my opinion. And I believe that the DEP decision on their superseding order in Hyannis or in Barnstable supports that. And then what I did give you is, you can see even from the topo sheets, USGS topo sheets, and they're a grand scale of topography, but you can even see in that the topo lines have moved. So what used to be a more gradual slope, it got, the topo lines got shifted northern, I'm going to say, reflecting the artificial manipulation of that landform. So what this does for the property owner is, there's still a picket fence there, but there's no longer a picket fence in the 0 to 50. The setback would be from the impoundment. I believe I don't believe that's a drainage feature. I would call that a wetland. So the setback from the structure to the resource area would be greater than 50 feet as measured from the impoundment. And it's, like I said, I've been around a while, so I have in my brain all these random jobs that I'm aware of that you like, oh, this reminds me of that. And I do have the whole file. It's kind of interesting. I don't know if anybody knew David Aubrey. He was he had a nice comment. He's a scientist. This letter here says he just got back from the Black Seas in Eastern Europe, and he's planning some big sea symposium. He's very interesting, and he's got a folksy way of writing. And it was like a little treasure to find in that file of something he'd written. And that he was the project manager on this case. So I don't know if I could answer any questions, or if you want to discuss it.
Let me just ask Amy what her thoughts are, because she has written a very small bit here, but I think that she's in agreement with you.
Yes, I am in agreement. In this particular case, regardless of artificial or not, this little bit of a slope, we'll call it at this point, it is significantly below flood level. So coastal banks have to provide a couple of things. Provide sediment to downdrift beaches, be allowed to erode. This is all stuff that lends itself to being thought of as wave action, or having immediate proximity to the ocean, which we don't have. The other things that coastal banks are significant for are storm damage prevention and flood control. So to me, in the event that we have a coastal flood that floods all of this, because it is floodplain, this little slope isn't really going to perform. It's below the flood level. It's below flood zone significantly. So it would not provide, in my opinion, those critical interests that a coastal bank is supposed to provide. So I did ask our DEP circuit rider for an opinion. I got kind of a convoluted opinion that for mostly didn't make sense to me. And kind of came to the same conclusion as Lynn, as for this particular property, that I don't believe this is a coastal bank. Maybe by its actual slope and actual definition, but not in its practicality and not in its function. I think more importantly, it doesn't function as a coastal bank here. It's not providing sediment. It's not providing flood control or storm damage prevention, in my opinion. So I would view this as a fence that was unauthorized in the 50 to 100 foot buffer. It is typically something we would have approved, likely administratively. We would have liked to have seen it raised, but off the ground, but it's a picket fence. Things can get through it. It's very low picket fence as well. So I would be comfortable if the commission was with having them either do an after the fact administrative review for the fence at double the fee. The fee is $50, so it's $100. It would be $100. With the condition that it cannot be made higher to prevent wildlife from accessing, and it cannot be made stockade. It would have to stay an open picket or a split rail type fence. If you have any, the other option is you have them file an administrative review, which is the $50 fee. You do have the option to levy fines for work that wasn't done, or was done without a permit, and that's up to the $300 mark. I think that all this time and effort that we've all spent, Mr. Damagala and us, to kind of figure out what's actually going on here actually means something too. So I would not be in favor of levying a fine. If anything, it would just be the after the fact double fee for the admin review, but I'm interested in what the commission has to say.
Okay, good, thanks, Amy. Wayne, do you have any comments on this?
I'm in favor of letting the man have his fence. I don't think that's a coastal bank in my estimation.
Okay.
I agree with Lee.
John?
Okay, I'm afraid I'm still hung up on the definition of a coastal bank, and I'm not disagreeing or agreeing one way or another how we should proceed here, but I'm confused about what you're saying, Lynn, in particular, which seems contradictory in a way to Amy's quote that she pulled out of the bet applying the Massachusetts coastal wetland regulations. Regulatory coastal banks, as well as coastal dunes, may consist of artificially deposited fill, provided they serve the functions. But it's that first part. You're saying that the result of a case in Barnstable was that any scarp that creates the appearance of a coastal bank doesn't really create a coastal bank because it's somehow artificially created. That you've created a slope, either wave action has created a slope or a bulldozer has created a slope that would appear to make it a coastal bank, but for some reason that doesn't. And I'm playing back to you what I heard. I'm not sure it's what you were saying. I'd really like to understand what this is, because it's becoming kind of a bugaboo. You know, what is the definition of a coastal bank?
Do you want me to, well, I would never say because A forever B. I would never, I do think it's a project by project analysis. And so that just because there was a decision in Barnstable, I think the decision in Barnstable, I think the property in Harwich is much more obvious or much clearer than the property in Barnstable, because the property in Barnstable, and I have the decision here, I mean, I can, if you're just interested in it, but the property in Barnstable So the difference between land subject to coastal storm flowage and a coastal bank is the degree of slope. So if you have land subject, to coastal storm flowage, it has to be less than a 10-to-1 slope. If you have something that comes in the Harwich case, or Harvest Hollow case, a bulldozer came in, or whatever he used for machinery, and carved this out in the daily use of his property as agriculture, he artificially created a slope. It doesn't magically then become a coastal bank, because it's not just an artificial slope that's created within land subject to coastal storm flowage. I mean, you could look at it another way. So if you look at that whole landform out there, it's flood zone on one end, flood zone on the other end, and in the middle you have this, I'm gonna call it an artificial bank, or this cut slope. If it were to flood, because with an A zone you just consider still water flooding, so you can picture it as a tub filling up to the flood zone contour. And when it fills up, it's going to inundate around both sides of this landform, because it wasn't scarped all the way around, and it's gonna flood behind, and it's gonna leave just this artificial slope or facing there. So when you look at it that way, you can clearly see that it's just an artifact of agriculture, and it's not a coastal bank. And I can forward you, or Amy can forward you the file. It's interesting. And you would have to look at it. And you would have to look at every one. I just believe that this one, to me, is clear.
Just to clarify one point, I don't want to get too hung up here. The case you're citing as some precedent or example that you're working from is a different situation where the steeper slope was not created by a machine, it was created by wave action or whatever to steepen a slope where a revetment was being put in. Is that correct?
There's two parts to that, and I think I might have been confusing in my letter. So the first part was they determined that it was not a bank. That was the first part of their decision. And they determined it was not a bank strictly because they determined that an artificial scarp made by nature didn't make a bank. We have here an artificial scarp made by an agricultural use, which I think is clearer. And then they looked then at the project. So then the project was revetment on not a bank, but on land subject to coastal storm flowage. I could have stopped just at the scarp, and it probably would have been less confusing. It's interesting, and and I don't know, that's the project that I know, that's the project that I spoke to DEP about, so I've always remembered it, and I've always applied it. I actually applied it to where Cape Healthcare is building a building in Orleans, and there was the same situation, and they agreed with me and allowed the building to go where they proposed it, where Down Cape proposed it.
Okay, I'm not going to pursue this any further.
You concede?
Right,
Sort of.
uncle, I think was the right. But send me the file, or send it to Amy, I'll get it from Amy. I'm not sure I'm going to read the whole thing,
Yeah,
but.
I'll send it to you.
So, yeah, would send it to me as well, Amy?
Yeah, I'll put it in your Dropbox so everybody can
All
see
right.
it.
Great, thank you.
For
Stan?
this I'll put it in the folder for this meeting that's set up, okay?
All right, super, thank you. Stan, any questions?
No, I guess I'll agree with Lynn and Amy seem to be in agreement that it's not a regulatory coastal bank, so I think
Well,
that's.
I liked your description of the floodwaters going around and leaving an artificial artifact in the middle, or
You don't even
whatever
have
it
to agree with my scarp or not scarp. You can just stop, and it's gonna be flooded around it, and it doesn't function. It's a micro, I don't look at topography in a micro way. I have to look at it larger, or else it doesn't make any sense. So you don't even have to consider argument A. You can just look at B if it makes you happier.
Yeah, good.
Well, I like Amy's comment that it's below the flood, before the, below the flood zone.
Yeah. I do have one question from the overall project, and we have the plan online here. So the initial concern was the post and rail fence that was right up against this, whatever we're gonna call this berm that was there. Has that been removed?
No, and if you like, he could remove that and consider it mitigation for the fence that's now moved further away from the wetland.
Yeah, I wouldn't consider it necessarily mitigation, but, I mean, because
It's still there.
that shouldn't have been there to begin with.
I don't even know who put that there.
I think the prior owner had put that in was the problem, but I just wanted to make sure that that comes out
Okay.
as part of the resolution of this. And then the second issue is that I think Amy's recommendation, we allow the picket fence to remain. And my understanding is that that's also a coyote preventative fence for the owner and that sort of a thing, which is fine. But I agree, and if anybody thinks otherwise, that we require that the property owner do file for an after-the-fact application, which would require a double filing fee for that. And I'm relatively comfortable with this going as a resolution, I think, to this whole issue. Anybody have any other comments, questions? Anybody in the audience have any concerns, questions? Amy, are you good? Good, thumbs up. All right, can we have a motion on this then, please? Do we, I think we need a motion for this one, do we, Amy?
You don't need a motion. You've directed them to file an after-the-fact admin review
Okay,
to resolve the fence.
wonderful, good. That was easy then. Thank you, Lynn, for your explanation and the time on this.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is Skinnequit CPC application, and let me preface this by saying that John has recused himself from this. And with that, we do not have a quorum tonight, so we can't vote or we can't take any definitive action on this tonight, but certainly we can have the hearing.
Would you prefer that I come back for the next meeting, or would
It's
you rather?
completely your call.
Okay.
I mean, at the next meeting, I assume we'll have more people in attendance, and it'd be helpful if we're gonna vote on it or take some more definitive action then, for them to have a better explanation of what you're proposing here.
Okay, well, I can certainly do that, or I can come back and answer any questions on the 21st, either one.
Yeah,
When they need the presentation for the other members, they'll be able to vote.
I have a suggestion.
yes, Amy?
I would suggest that since Anne's here, that she make her presentation tonight. The presentation is being taped, so we can make that available for the other commissioners and hopefully have an expedited meeting next time. You have a very full agenda on the 21st.
Okay,
So I would recommend that you make the presentation, that Anne fields any questions that you have right now, and that we make the presentation available to the commissioners who are not present tonight.
okay, terrific.
Okay, sounds good. So I'm Ann Helgen, and I'm here representing the Watershed Association of South Harwich, WASH, it's otherwise known as WASH, which is the pond association for property owners that abut or have access to the pond. And I'm here to ask for your vote of support, if not tonight, then on the 21st, for to support this project, which is an alum remediation of Skinnequit Pond, for our CPC submission, which is due October 3rd. The amount that we're asking for is $92,000, which is an amount to be determined. We're kind of trying to drill down on some of the numbers and talking to various people to get a more, a number that we feel very comfortable with and that has some contingency in it too for increased costs and that kind of thing. I'm going to speak off of this blue slide presentation. I think we gave you a lot of information. I believe you have the whole CPC application and the Skinnequit Pond evaluation, everything. I'm just going to speak off this. I'm happy to answer questions from any of the documents. So we have the support of both the Conservation and the Natural Resources departments. We've been working with them for the last couple of years, actually, and before that, Heinz has worked with people from Skinnequit Pond and with WASH for over 20 years. We do a lot of testing for the town on Skinnequit Pond during the summer, and also I'll go through all of the things we have tried on the pond since the early 2000s. So if you turn to the map part of the presentation, The town owns about almost
Let me
10
stop you
acres
for
of land. Yep,
Just a minute, if I may,
Sure.
Ann. Amy, I'm not seeing this plan in the Dropbox.
did they get the slide presentation?
She's muted.
Is she, I think you're on mute, Amy.
Can you hear us, Amy?
Can I have permission to share my screen?
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Was this,
In mine, I don't, sorry, but I'll bring it up.
okay. Thank you.
I wonder if it's,
I'm sorry, I
sorry about
thought
that,
this was in
Ann.
your
We'll get it going. All right. Okay, I got it up on mine. Share the screen. And I'll
Good.
just let me know what you need me to do, Ann.
Okay, so in the next page, we'll just go right to the map part. I don't know if it's easier for me to point at that or to just talk off of this, but.
Hang on one second, I don't know why it won't let me change the page. There we go.
Yeah, can you move it up at all so they can see the whole map and the whole page or not?
I'm trying.
Yeah. Well, anyway, you can see. at
I'm
the
sorry.
top-
Here, let me see what I can do. Better?
That's perfect, thank you. So the town owns about 10 acres of land. Do you want me to go and point at it?
Yeah, it'd be helpful.
Town owns about 10 acres of land up here, 9.8 acres that were originally a cranberry bog and were purchased by the town in the 1960s. It's now designated wetlands. There is a small path off of Ocean Street that is public access to the pond, but it's not very, very large because almost all of the pond, all of the amount of the town-owned land abutting the pond is wetlands, and so it's not used for anything else. The Skinnicut Road is really misleading. There's no road there. It's just wetlands that go straight to the pond. Harwich Conservation Trust has 4 parcels over here, and then the Herring Run is here. It runs under Uncle Meany's Road and out to the Red River estuary. And so this project actually dovetails very nicely with the Tuttle grant, land grant to the Harwich Conservation Trust, part of which was to preserve the herring run that is active and the herring come up and spawn in the Skinnicut Pond during the year. The pond is among the smallest of the great ponds in Harwich. It's the 4th smallest. It's 18 acres, but it's one of the deepest. It's the 4th deepest at 32 feet. So that's pretty much the pond stuff that I wanted to tell you about. Just to give you, it's the only pond, according to Heinz, is the only pond that's south of 28. It's very close. It's about a quarter to a third of a mile to the Red River beach from where it is. So why Skinnicut Pond? Well, it's an active spawning grounds for the Red River estuary herring run. It used to be an eel run, actually, but we haven't seen eels since the big fish kill in the late 1990s, which I'll go through in a minute. It's a very biodiverse ecosystem that supports a ton of species and wildlife, not only around the pond, but also from other core habitats that are nearby. This is not designated a core habitat by the NHESP, but it is designated a critical natural habitat, or critical natural landscape, I guess. I have to get my name. And it's also a home of a variety of species designated by Massachusetts as species of greatest conservation concern. And there's a list in, we go into more detail in the actual write-up here. This pond has had impaired waters for a long time. It's been designated impaired by the Comprehensive Waste Management Plan. It's also been designated unacceptable by ABCC and in other, by other studies that have been done. In 2021, it was closed for 6 weeks during the summer because of cyanobacteria toxic blooms as tested by APCC. And the public health issue is that it gets posted at this small little path down a road off of Main Road. Nobody sees it. We get the notifications, we send it out to people. We don't have emails for everyone on the pond. We don't have, people rent and the renters aren't aware of it, and we try to go out and tell them, don't let your dog go in here because it can be quite dangerous. But, so we've had a lot of that. And then the other thing is we have a very engaged and supportive group of people through WASH. What happened is in 1998, we had a major toxic bloom that was a fish killed mussels, fish, frogs, everything you can imagine. And there was a suspicion that it was because there was a little bit of a dam from the old cranberry bog that broke and that it just loaded the pond in that year. But there was no firm, decision or that was the cause. So in 2001 and 2022, pond owners got together and they and I think with Heinz also, rigged up a couple of oxygenation hoses into the pond, paid for it by themselves. That didn't seem to work. In 2004, worked with Heinz on barley bales that were supposed to mitigate the algae growth in the pond. It's really more, as I've read up on it, a treatment for wastewater, like hog farms and stuff like that. It didn't really work in the pond. 2005, we did a Fuki biocord type of reactor, which is supposed to create humic, as it deteriorated, created humic acid, which was supposed to mitigate the algae in the pond also. Finally, in 2004, we also formed WASH. In 2007, the Solar Bee was purchased, and the Solar Bee is a solar-powered water recirculator that circulates water from around 8 feet deep. So it's not very deep, but we found if we went deeper, it would stir up a lot of the nutrient load and actually do the opposite, make algae grow instead of help mitigate it. But it clearly has gotten to the point where it's not working as effectively as we would like to have it, and we've had increasing toxic algae blooms and also longer and even some in the fall. And I know that's due to a number of different factors. It's not one factor or another factor, but it is something that's important. Throughout that, we've been doing testing. The pond owners have spent about $100,000 over the last 20 years invested in the Solar Bee and its maintenance. And then we also paid for a study in June of 22, well, actually in the spring of 22, that you have included in your package to look at what the water quality, what the management options would be for the pond, and what the sediment looked like. And it was done by Water Resources, I keep saying Inc., but it's not, Services. And they've worked with you, I think, or worked with the town on Hinckley's Pond and that kind of thing. And they came up with 3 different management options, and alum seems to be the choice. It's much less expensive than either oxygenation and dredging, and it's much more proven than oxygenation. We've been watching the Sarah's Pond, what they're doing in Orleans on Sarah's Pond with oxygenation, but that's been very expensive, and there still hasn't been any proven remediation there. And then it's also much, much less expensive, but also less environmentally disruptive compared to dredging. I don't even know if we could dredge the pond. I don't know where we put all the, sludge and all that kind of thing. But those were the 3 options, and we have decided to move forward with alum. So then the next, I guess we skipped one slide. That was the Wise-Skinnecook Pond, and then you can go on to the next one. This one, it's consistent with local town-wide management plans. This is important to CPC, which is why you're seeing it here. But it preserves and enhances, a threatened resource, which is the herring run, and also just a freshwater pond in Harwich. It matches, and I put here on this, when you get this, you can see how it matches up with various land management, open space and recreation plans, local comprehensive plan, and the comprehensive waste management plan in various areas. It I will just say one thing that I need to correct on this. It says achieves phosphorus removal. Alum doesn't obviously remove phosphorus, but it will cap the phosphorus and it will allow the algae, it will keep the phosphorus hopefully lower in the water column and allow the algae to, or mitigate the algae growth and make the pond more healthy. It preserves and enhances an inland coastal wetlands, wildlife, and plant habitat. It preserves and restores the ecological integrity of a freshwater pond, and it prevents the loss or degradation of critical wildlife and plant habitats. Maintains existing population and species, all of which are in these plans. And I really believe that we will be able to increase the populations and hopefully even broaden the species if we can mitigate what's happened to the pond. We never really recovered from the 1998 bloom. I think that it used to be an eel run. No eels have been seen. No freshwater mussels have been seen that we, in the last pretty much 15 to 20 years. So I think they just, and so there are a number of different the bullfrogs that you used to hear all the time, you don't hear, I think they still exist, but they aren't in the same number. So we're hoping that we can get the pond back to a place where it can be a happy home for all of those. Next one. Oh, additional reasons to support. Again, I went through preservation and restoration of a freshwater pond, which is an important town asset. Lowest cost of the remediation options and the most proven and the least environmentally disruptive. Consistent with town meeting actions. Most recently, the funding for Hinckley's Pond addresses public health risks, and then just the WASH support here and the support that we've had from the town. I mean, Heinz and Amy have been great, and Heinz has done he was really involved in a lot of these early things to try on the pond that didn't really work. So we feel like we've been through a fair amount of time trying to figure out how we can mitigate this and make the pond healthier, and now we're focusing on the alum treatment. And then the last part of this is really about public access, that both of the land management plan and the open space and rec plan, don't believe really this is, because there's no room really for recreation space there, and because one of them says all of the land is pretty much within the resources, it's pretty much wetlands. They don't believe that this should be developed as recreation. In these plans, they specifically said it probably shouldn't be without buying additional land there should not be used as recreation. It's also not adjacent to a main road or policeable. I know these aren't totally things that are important for you, but I think it's just important to get that out, that it's not been identified as a recreational asset, and so that's what we're at. But Amy has pledged to help clear the path a little bit. There's a lot of poison ivy on there, and do some other sort of cleaning up of the area.
Okay.
So that's pretty much my presentation. I'm happy to answer any other questions that you might have.
Terrific.
Or elaborate on anything.
Good. Amy, do you want to speak now, or do you want me to come back to you at the end?
No, I'll just speak briefly now, if you don't mind. So what they're asking is just kind of for your general support to submit application to CPC. WASH understands that they have to apply for a notice of intent with the Conservation Commission to do this work, so that you're not saying that your vote to support the application is not to be construed as you're going to necessarily, preemptively approve this project. You have to review it as you would any project. This is just your support to put application forward.
And I don't know if I made it clear, but as I said, I think we do have the support of the natural resources and the conservation departments. Heinz is actually going to be the applicant on the CPC, so he'll be the point person for the alum treatment, just as he was with Hinckley's.
Okay. All right, great. Well, thank you very much for that explanation. That was very helpful. Wayne, do you have any?
I just have one question. Do the herons still run up there?
They do.
Good.
Mhm.
That's
It's
good
not a
news.
huge, I mean, it has, I guess, since the 90s, it's not as big as it used to be, but yeah, it's so much fun to see. And we see them in the pond all
Oh,
summer
good.
long,
That's good
flipping
news.
around and everything. But it's not as big as the other herring runs, but it still is an
Oh,
important
I know.
one.
I remember it when I was a kid. We used to get down there and
Yeah,
catch them.
it's fun to catch it, yep.
Oh, sorry, I just had a question, what's the water level this summer with the drought? Has the pond gone down?
You know, I haven't noticed a huge lowering of the water. I mean, I haven't really noticed that at all, but so I'm probably not the person to answer.
And I have one other question. How effective was the alum treatment in Hinckley's?
Very effective. I read the report that came out that was required as an order of conditions, and it reduced, I mean, increased their clarity from something like 1.3 meters to 6.9 meters, or don't hold me to those numbers, but something like that. And then they do have 2 active cranberry bogs, one of which has now been taken out of service and the town's buying it. But, so their visibility went slightly back up after a little bit, but it's still very successful. And one of the pond owners actually said they had just been out on Long Pond, which was treated years ago, and said she couldn't believe how clear the water was there. So that was treated in 2007 with alum. So, you know, every pond's different, and we have a different makeup. And the herring, while it's great, they also eat the zooplankton, which are also good at reducing you know, which caused maybe the zooplankton also are helpful in reducing algae. So we'll see. But Water Resources think this is a good option for us, and that it should last for, you know, a good 10 years minimum, and probably hopefully longer than that.
Last time I was up there, I remember the water quality on Skinnecook, it was almost, I don't know what the word is to describe it, almost like a tannin color. You
Yeah.
know, will this address that too? Will that cure
I
that?
hope so. Right now it's very green. It looks really pea soupy and not in a cyano. We haven't, APCC's been testing it. We haven't had a toxic bloom recently, but it looks like it could. And it's pretty tannin. I'm hoping it will. I don't know the answer to that completely, but you know, the clarity should increase in terms of depth significantly.
Do you know what causes that?
The tannin color, I
Yeah.
don't know. I'd have to ask Ken Wagner, who wrote the Water Resources. Amy, do you know what causes the kind of tannin color of the water at Skinnecook? You know, when it's kind of a little bit.
I can't hear you because you're not facing the mic. And can caller 3 please mute themselves?
Yeah, the question was, do you know what causes the water in Skinnecook to be sort of a brownish tannin kind of color?
I mean, not exactly. A lot of the ponds, you know, farther north of here have higher iron content and things like that. It could have something to do with that. I don't know exactly.
I think that it.
But
go ahead.
alum would only really bind the phosphorus, which prohibits algae growth. So whatever the natural color of that water should be, it would be.
And I will say that before, because we bought right before the 1998 bloom, and I will say that it was much clearer then and not that kind of brownish color. So I don't know whether that's a form of some sort of plant growth in there that is causing that. Because the solar bee addressed some issues, but it also didn't address other algae issues. So
You taking that out?
we would be taking it out, yeah. We're going to keep it in until we get. It's going to be a process if we're approved, and we know that we may not be approved, but we're hoping we will.
Hopefully there's a market for used solar bees
I
somewhere.
hope so. Actually, Amy just got an email from someone in Dennis. They're doing something. It sounds a little bit different than a solar bee, but they wanted to know what our experience was. So.
Craigslist.
Yeah.
Yeah. Stan?
Just trying to understand how it works. So you go to, this is getting the recommendation
Yep.
to.
So we'll go to the health department too, and we'll go to the
No,
wastewater.
but for CPC then, so then you get approval from the funds from CPC, hopefully.
Yeah.
And then we go back through the approval process at that point?
Well, the RFP, so here's what happens is we have to have our application in by October 3rd and then have everything in
The
order by
CPC application.
December, the CPC application. And at the same time, we also have to get an order of intent, right, filed with the state, which Amy is going to do. And then CPC, first of all, has to say, we'll take this and we'll move this forward in their process, that it meets all the qualifications and that kind of thing, which it should, because Hinckley's did. And then it goes through the process in the town of Harwich, and then the funds get appropriated at town meeting.
Right.
So we don't know until town
town
meeting
meeting.
whether or not whether or not we've gotten approval for it. But it goes through a number of different processes, and we will also be going to the health department to ask for their support, and to the wastewater department to ask for their support, and so we'll make sure that we have all of that in line for this application before December, if not before October 3rd. So then we don't know, and then the RFP, then the town puts an RFP out for someone to do the Alum application. We would probably apply the Alum in the fall of 2023, because you don't want to do it in the spring anyway, but we won't have the funds
wouldn't
until
have the
July
funds till
1st.
town meeting, right?
So we'll probably have the RFP ready to go out, hopefully, and then apply for, have the RFP go out, and then there's only a couple of different companies that do it, and I think one just bought the other, so it'll probably be Solitude or one of the companies that's done it before. And then the application would be done, and then generally there's an order of conditions that involves some testing, especially in the first 2 years, and a report. But there's also, which we're trying to include in our costs here too, and then there's testing that's done over, I think, 10 years really, too. So.
Good.
Yeah, because we just did the Hinckley, 2-3 years ago?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
What did you say?
The Hinckley project,
Yes.
we went through that.
Yes.
On that, so.
Yeah, and they wrote a report recently, and they've had the alum treatment. They haven't done the other part of the public access part, but they've done the alum treatment. It's been I think it's been very successful. So.
Wonderful.
All right. That's
Good. Terrific. Well, thank
Okay.
you very much for that
Thank you,
explanation.
and I'll
Yeah.
tune in, or I can be available at the 21st, the meeting at the 21st, if anyone has any
Okay.
questions.
And we'll encourage all the other members to watch this
Okay.
evening.
Yeah, and there's lots of information here. I know you have a lot on your plate, but
Okay.
hopefully your questions get answered. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you. Thank you for coming.
And if you have any more questions, reach out to Amy, and I can always answer them through her or by email too.
Okay.
Okay?
All
Thank you
right.
very much.
Great.
Appreciate it.
Thank
Thanks.
you. If you see John lurking around outside.
What?
If you see John looking around outside.
I will. I'll tell him to
Yeah.
come back in.
All right, thank you. Alrighty. Next item we have on the agenda is the Seaway Beach at Old Mill Point. Do we have somebody here to discuss this?
I'm Conley's on the phone.
This is John Conley.
John, if I,
I'm calling in, but
yeah, you have a echo, John, on your speaker. If you could either turn off your phone or turn off your computer, one or the other, I think that might help.
okay.
That's better. Okay, the floor is yours, John.
Is that better?
That's great.
Okay, well, actually, I wasn't expecting to take the floor, but I was expecting Amy to go forward. I just wanted to pass on. I'm here to answer any questions that might occur. But I'll let Amy take it.
Okay, so John Connolly is the president of the Old Mill Point Association. He brought it to my attention recently that just west of the town's Pleasant Road Beach area, before the really big jetty, the beach had dropped so significantly that a number of large boulders had become exposed, and they're in the intertidal zone. So at high tide, if you're swimming or walking in there, you really can't see them, and they are a hazard. I walk that beach pretty frequently. I did so earlier in the summer to look for piping plovers, as I do all of our beaches, and I didn't notice that this was so, the beach had dropped so much. So, sorry, there's a delay and it's kind of messing with my speech in my brain.
Yeah, it's all right.
I think actually if John Connolly, if you mute yourself, that would be really helpful. I'll try it again. Thank you, that seems better. So what they would like to do is just one day at a low tide in the off-season, fall, winter, early spring, is to be able to take a machine at low tide and move those stones, so they're out of the intertidal area and they're not a hazard for beachgoers, but still keep them in the resource and instead put them up against the existing jetty that's there, not extending the jetty in any way, but just putting them up against them, kind of just moving them parallel, and just getting them out of the way so they're not a hazard, but still could provide potentially some benefit for some other marine organisms. So because it was actually in the resource area, I didn't want to take this on and do this administratively without your input, the commission's input. I would recommend that you let him do an administrative review for a one-time, 1 day. And they're not looking to like scrape down and see how far down they can get with the rocks. They really just want to take what's at the surface, and move those over so they're not a hazard. So I'd recommend you letting me do an admin review for this one time.
Okay. All right, great, thank you. Any questions?
No, well, I do have one question. When they bring the machinery in, Amy, where are they proposing to get on the beach?
It would have to get permission or the okay from the selectmen to get on a Pleasant Road beach.
All right.
Okay, John? Yes.
Something, I'm from Old Mill Point, I'm on the board there. I just want to add to what Amy is saying, that I have pictures of the rocks here on my phone. I'm happy to show any of you if you care to see them, but they are definitely a hazard to children and to people who are not aware that they're there, because they're almost completely submerged during high tide. I have pictures of them during low tide, and when kids go out there, especially when they're coming from Pleasant Road Beach and they don't know that the rocks are there, we are terribly afraid that somebody is going to crack their head open or some terrible accident is going to happen with these rocks if we don't do something with them. So moving them, the solution that we think might work the best is to just move them next to the jetty so that anybody who walks that beach will see that there are rocks there in front of the jetty, and the beach area where they might want to swim will be clear. So that's...
Yeah, there was a picture in our material this evening that shows the rocks. I think probably what you're referencing. John, any questions? Stan, anything? The only question I have, when you take the rocks out, do we have to do any beach nourishment there?
I would say no at this time, but I did make it known that beach nourishment, this area would benefit from beach nourishment. The town nourishes its section. Old Mill Point does have the ability in its permit to add sand.
Okay, all right, so that'll be assessed once they're removed?
Yeah,
And
I'll definitely be involved and I'll inspect it afterwards.
And as part of the administrative review, can we require nourishment if you feel it's appropriate?
I would say we could, because we are allowing an action in a resource area. I would think within a couple of tide cycles, whatever holes are there are going to even themselves out. It should be, the association should be looking towards nourishing that area anyways, but yes, we could definitely put it in the permit that upon my inspection, if it's deemed that it needs sand, then you would have to do it.
Okay.
I don't think that's going to be the case, but
Okay, all right, fine. I just want to make sure that we cover that.
yeah, and they're really good to work with, so I'm not concerned that you wouldn't follow through with things. So
Yeah, all right, fine. So what do you need from us on this, Amy? Anything?
nope. Are you just kind of consensus? Are you okay with me handling this administratively?
Yep. Anybody have any concerns? No, I think you're good.
All right, John, I'll be in touch tomorrow. I'll email over the application.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Next item on the agenda is a discussion and possible vote with respect to Chloe's Path. Do we have anybody here?
Should we come up?
If you would, please.
Yeah, please, if you don't mind, Jeff. Good evening. Amy, thanks for being here and putting us on the agenda. And Mr. Chairman and members of the commission, thank you. My name's Peter Gorey. I live at 226 Sisson Road. With me tonight, Kathy.
Flowage, 225 Sisson.
And at least one of our neighbors is in the audience. We're here to cover two broad aspects of what you may or may not be aware of, because I know there's transition always on boards like this. I'm new to Sisson Road, but I grew up here in Harwich, graduating from Harwich High in 1993. I bought my house last May, and about 6 weeks after that found out that there was a 96-unit apartment building proposed for Chloe's Path. So you've probably seen some of the coverage, you'd probably see the selectmen's meetings. We are moving very, very quickly into what's known as a comprehensive permit process, which will go through the Zoning Board of Appeal. I will note, however, and I'm going to submit a ton of information to you, specifically and firstly, that the Zoning Board of Appeal is actually encouraged by the state's Department of Housing and Community Development to seek out comments from other local boards. That was somehow not really done through the LIP, the Local Initiative Program, which was last year's attempt to get a friendly 40B. This is now going into the sort of unfriendly territory. We are asking you as citizens, as taxpayers, and as neighbors to please get involved with commenting on this project. You do have jurisdiction from everything that we've read. I used to work in government. I staffed the City of Boston's Conservation Commission. Very familiar with this path, and I'm very familiar with this process, though there's some question about some of the jurisdictional questions. There is nothing that we are aware of in statute or in practice from you commenting as a board, and more specifically as an abutter to the land in question, about the project, about how it's proposed to be built, about its scale, about its outflow of septic, about its disruption of protected and deed restricted lands, including those protecting eastern box turtle, which we know to be present, and specifically protecting land that you own or are responsible for the town. So that's point number one. We would ask you to get involved formally, if not informally, but definitely formally, and offer comments, and they might be agnostic, neutral, or in support of. But we have heard nothing from this commission whatsoever regarding Chloe's Path. And I think that's, and I described it in an email that you probably all saw, it's like a jurisdictional jump ball. That's not really, frankly, helpful, and we are asking you for help. We're here to ask you for help because we are unclear as to why the Conservation Commission that is charged with protecting lands that the town owns, and specifically to comment on things like setbacks, where this proposal, again, of over 100,000 square feet and 144 bedrooms and likely 250 human beings residing in a, frankly, suburban designed building with underground parking that would be structured and subterranean with a fire access road that we can all show you. I should get into graphics as much as you want. I'm quite versed on this project. The fire road and the rooftop drainage systems would be built into sandy soil in the buffer, so it would have to be structure if it were to support the 25-ton ladder truck that this town of Harwich just bought. So these are the kinds of things that the 40B process sort of says, we'll cover that at the end. We need to cover this now because frankly the project we don't believe can be built and certainly shouldn't be built at this scale. We are not opposed to affordable housing. We are not opposed to development on that site. Kathy and at least one of our other neighbors has been working on this site for over 20 years, as has this commission. So that's point number one, and forgive me for being somewhat verbose, but that's point number two. Point number one. Point number two, which we'd love to have Amy talk about, hopefully she's still here, is the condition of the orders, the status of the orders of condition passed by this commission through Amy as its agent in 2016. There were multitude special, general, and specific conditions for restoration of the land, for habitat restoration for the eastern box turtle, and for both erosion control, which we believe may or may not be completed, and other plantings, none of which was done. There was clear cutting done at least 5 years ago with a permit that's now expired by 3 years and 6 months, with no action by this town, by the administrator, whom I like and have worked with great so far, but no action by this board. And right in the orders of condition, it says that violations would be $300 per day, per violation. We're talking about over 1,000 days. That's $300,000 in fines that should have been levied. In our opinion, that we are certainly lay people, but I've been doing this a long time, and I've paid fines, and I've had clients have to pay fines. This is, frankly, this is a good government matter at this point. We believe strongly, we're asking the commission to get its stronger and more specific opinions from town council and compare notes with your respective colleagues on the other boards and get some real answers, because we are in the crosshairs. We expect something will be built there, but we are talking about a massive development, the likes of which this town has not seen since the Belmont or the original Wichmar Harbor was built. This is nothing like, with all due respect to the other people who presented this evening, a fence that we talked about for 20 minutes or a pond that I used to swim in and skinny dip in for half an hour. This requires the attention of all boards through the ZBA as directed and required by law. But this requires all of our attention, because if it's done improperly and if it's done wrong, we're just going to be in a lawsuit down the road. So that's my statement. I appreciate you letting me speak before you and having us this evening. I am very curious what, if any, actions might be done coming out of this meeting going forward. It doesn't have to happen tonight with regard to expired permits and, frankly, work that was done and not completed. And I will submit again, I sent some stuff to Amy, and I promise I'll wrap up. The town, writ large, capital T town of Harwich, is named in the deed restrictions. The town of Harwich. If this commission is not the protector and the agent that should also opine on any modifications to those deed restrictions, please tell us what agency or what commission should. That's what we need from you. Thank you.
Thank you for your service and your time. I know it's a lot. As Pete said, I've been following this, coming to meetings for 20 years. It's kind of discouraging. I'm hearing when you talk about other projects like the follow-up and things have to be followed up year after year, I do scratch my head at why 6 years ago this was permitted. A lot of stuff that was supposed to happen in the deed restrictions and that was waved through hasn't been done, and yet it doesn't appear to have been followed up on. There's no violations issued. And in fact, we had begged for that to be looked into and addressed a year ago, because that was before the state weighed in on this. Now the state has weighed in and we're really kind of swimming upstream. the Skinnequit Pond gal is just one example, you know, what's, just in general, what's been destroyed or damaged isn't easily recovered. We know that. We see it all around us. So the habitat there has already been impinged upon. We know that something's going to be built there. Again, we're not opposed to multi-unit. We're not opposed to affordable housing. We feel the scale is way out of line. It empties into the Saquatucket watershed. There's a really, really serious nitrogen concern. The plan calls for a nitrogen swap. That doesn't resolve that. That doesn't undo or would undo a big investment that's been made by the town.
Coldbrook.
Coldbrook.
Yep.
I always want to say Coy.
Thank you.
So, you know, originally, they had to, the threshold was set up by the state 20 years ago that it had to, this project, any project there had to go through MESA. That's where the deed restrictions came from, because of species in there. I had a box turtle in my yard this year. We all live in Harwich. I've lived here a long time. I'm not born here, but I've been here my whole adult life. All the species have diminished. I don't hear bobwhite quail anymore. I don't see snappers in the yard, but I do still see box turtles. Had one there this year. I just would like to ask you, as Pete did, please look into this. Please protect the water to the extent that you can. Please do whatever you can to reduce the scale of this and make it reasonable. There are traffic concerns. There are fire safety concerns. There are environmental concerns. There are watershed concerns. And we just feel like we've been kind of, you know, we don't feel like we have many allies. We feel like it's just sort of running roughshod over us. So you do have standing. You have a really critical role here. I don't see anybody else that has the role that you have. I really read very carefully the state guidelines for the local review. And on what I numbered, page 8, it very specifically states the board, meaning the ZBA, must notify any other relevant boards. Such boards include yours. They shall take into consideration the recommendations of the local boards. So, and it goes on and on about the role specifically of health and of conservation within these processes, because it goes around many of the local restrictions, but it does not go around the state restrictions or environmental guidelines. So that's, I think you have a very important role here to ensure that this stuff is considered and to consider what the impacts would be and to push back as necessary. The selectmen weighed in, but here we are.
And we're happy for it. So that was a close vote. We also understand there's an existential housing crisis. It's just, we need the questions asked, because frankly, it's us representing about 60 neighbors asking the questions.
Yeah,
and again, Amy's been great and super responsive to us, but no one's asked MESA that I've done FOIAs, I've done public records requests, I have it all. And, you know, if I had to handicap it, we'd win in court because I have it all. We could have the conversation right now, and if we don't use all the proverbial arrows in the quiver now with the ZBA won't know what to say when they come in for the comprehensive permit, right? And you are entitled, again, as owner, as a butter, to comment on the scale of the project. No one, and I don't believe Attorney Quessel or anyone else has said that you can't. We were told, unfortunately, a year ago, and that's not a knock on your staff, but we were told we couldn't come here because you didn't have anything before you. Well, we're here now because that was incorrect, right? So that's the kind of jurisdictional jump ball we need fixed. And we're asking you again for your help, and we thank you for your time.
So,
Happy to take questions.
And encourage you to, if you
Read.
haven't, read these guidelines
We'll
for
send
local
everything.
review, and please put it on your agendas and please consider it.
Happy to take questions or just leave you with something to think about.
Thank you. Let me ask, anybody have any questions?
Definitely got a lot to think about.
Thanks.
And it's a huge project, and it's in a kind of a sensitive area, sitting on top of that hill overlooking that old cranberry bog that runs right out into Saquatucket Harbor eventually. I don't understand how that road got approved to begin with all the fill they put in there. And they ran the fill right down the toe of that slope is right at the edge of that bog.
Into your land.
Yeah, I don't understand how that ain't got by. We don't allow stuff to happen in 50-foot resource area. And all of a sudden, there's 1,000 yards of fill that got pushed right down in there.
To our knowledge, and this is anecdotal, but to our knowledge, no review by the building department of the structural work for even the roadbed that would lead for a 7-lot subdivision, let alone hundreds and hundreds of cars. And frankly, I've called it and termed it, the only thing I can call it is a completely caricature, farcical fire lane that the chief rightfully requested, built on sand for a 25-ton ladder truck to fight a fire in a 53-foot building. It can't be fought from the back of the police station. A fire in the woods can't be fought from anywhere but there. These are the kinds of things that, in the buffer, like, these are the kinds of things that are in your chart. So I'll stay open for questions.
John?
If I may, Mr. Chair?
Thanks.
Oh, there's Amy back.
Hi, Amy.
How are you?
Welcome back.
I didn't leave.
Oh, I didn't see you.
Your picture disappeared.
No, I've been here the whole time. So the reason you haven't seen it is because it hasn't come forward for application for ZBA yet. So I had no way of actually knowing that what concepts that were provided were actually what was going to come forward in application to the town. I have seen the project as the proposed project, and would anticipate that when ZBA is reviewing it, that I would give you all those materials so you can weigh in as well. I didn't want you to have to weigh in on something that is not necessarily what may be submitted to the town. As far as, so you definitely will have time to comment on that draft proposal. I have provided comments to the Board of Selectmen when they asked for comments from departments about concerns. I've always made it known that they have these outstanding issues with natural heritage, that they do not have a certificate of compliance with conservation, so that is a hindrance on the deed. In my letters, or in my comments to the selectmen made comments to Mass Housing. Those, I sent those comments in. I would anticipate that those comments were provided to Mass Housing. In regards to the previous application, I'm more than happy to reach out again if the commission would like me to Natural Heritage regarding the turtle protection plan. I too want to see things done correctly, but I'm at a bit of a loss here when it comes to legal standing regarding the commission, and that's why I did ask Attorney Questle what I perceived to be the questions that we needed answering. And so, but going forward, we don't need to make, I can certainly provide you with lots more information. In your packets was the order of conditions, the approved roadway plan. What I would really like to see do is help from the council or from the town in getting them to do an as-built plan, because according to the approved conservation plan for that road, no activity was taking place in the 0 to 50. The vast majority of the work was actually outside the 100. There was only supposed to be a tiny little section of roadway actually in the 100-foot buffer zone. The rest was just some clearing. But according to council, we don't have the right to require that. And I want to investigate that a little bit farther. So definitely want to kind of see this through a little bit more. And if now is the time for the commission to be more involved, then absolutely we can provide you with all that information. The reason I haven't involved you too much is, again, because up until we don't know if the final plan that's going in front of ZBA is the actual plan that I saw a while ago.
So, Amy, the order of conditions that we issued back in 2016 has expired, right? Or they haven't, let me rephrase that, they haven't requested an extension.
It's expired.
It expired. So
Yes.
it's essentially dead.
Correct.
Okay, I mean, that answers, I think,
They
some,
have to do anything to bring it back into compliance. It would mean a refile with the Conservation Commission.
yeah.
But for sections, again, this is our reading of it, and we've asked some pro bono lawyers to assist us with this. We haven't frankly lawyered up yet, and, because we're hoping that the town will do its part, which we know you're gonna try to. We read the conditions as stating, there's many sections that Attorney Questle rightfully pointed out say shall, but there are multiple sections that say must, and there are dates, and there are fines in sections submitted that became part of and are filed with the Registry of Deeds. And I believe some of the questions that were asked and were limited in their scope. I think we need to look under the hood. I will leave you with that. I will also say for just to correct without disagreeing, trying to correct one of the comments. If this project had passed the local initiative program through the selectmen by one vote, a 3-2 vote the other way, this would already be happening. So the developer, by the way, and I will note that, again, because no one asked the commission, folks only asked the conservation agent for their opinion, and again, you're in a butter, no one asked you for your opinion. The developer said more than once, in fact, he said it at every single presentation, they were not changing the plan. It was a 96-unit, 53-story building, full stop. There was never 53-foot building, excuse me, 3-story building. They were never changing the plan. So what was before the selectmen is before you now.
You're bringing a lot of issues into this that, go well beyond the scope of what our focus, our concern is.
Fair enough.
But with respect to the order of conditions, I mean, those are issued on the premise that the work will commence once they're issued, and it will conform with the orders, the conditions that we've prescribed. My understanding is there was never any work done.
No, there was clearing and a building of a roadway.
There was work done, Amy?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. There was utilities.
Correct. Yeah, you went down the road today.
I understand that, but I thought that was for a different part of the project.
Well, that was for the original, that was the road for the original 8-lot subdivision.
All right. Thank
That
you.
would be the
All right.
same road that would service the housing
The
units.
7 homes.
All right. So how do we
Seven-
react to
seven homes,
that?
Sorry?
My question was, how do we react to that then, Amy? If the work was done, do we have to ensure that it met the order of conditions?
Yes, that's why I reached out to Attorney Questle and asked, one, could we require a certificate of compliance? Because part of that is it says in the order of conditions, upon request of a certificate of compliance, an as-built plan shall be provided. They haven't asked for a certificate of compliance yet, even though I have asked them to a couple of times. Attorney Questle has stated that we cannot require them to file a certificate of compliance, and that's why I'm guessing they have not provided an as-built plan.
But regardless of whether or not they request a certificate of compliance, if the work performed under the order of conditions was done improperly, how do we address that?
I can't say if it was or wasn't, to be honest.
Okay,
They have stabilized the slopes. We did have an issue with erosion control. It was addressed. I've told them that the erosion controls should be actually removed because now they're just decomposing and they're not in any great state. So I can ask that question, is how, if we cannot require that they provide a request for a certificate of compliance, how do we require that they ensure that they are in compliance with their other conditions and with the construction of the roadway? That I can ask, is what mechanism can we use to do that?
yeah, I mean, I mean, putting the politics aside of this whole initiative, it seems that's just sort of a core function of our processes, that for any other project, we would require that the work be done in conformance with whatever conditions we set. And if we have to go out and confirm whether it was or not, then we'd take action accordingly on our findings. Stan?
I'm getting confused with timing, Amy. When was the road built? Was it under the order of conditions time period?
Yes, it was built before, so it was issued in 2016, it was built that year, the next year.
Okay, so it was under, but the order, so nothing since then could have been done because there's no
Correct.
open order of conditions since then.
Correct.
But I'll submit this again, but there are sections in the general conditions that, to our reading, require completion of the turtle management plan, among other things, which has not been done. And as Amy and I discussed about 3 weeks ago, or 10 days ago, the state, because Amy, hopefully you've gotten clarification here, the state has not told Amy that they haven't completed the turtle management plan, but they've told me as a citizen that. And I don't know if that's because no one's asked the state, but if they've told me, and Administrator Power, the selectmen, and Amy, we're all copied to that same email, we know they're out of compliance. This is like a do-loop of epic proportions. We know they're out of compliance, and it says right here, special conditions, failure to comply with all the conditions of this order shall result in enforcement action by the Harwich Conservation Commission, which may include fines not to exceed $300 per day per violation in the conditions, registered with the Registry of Deeds.
Wind back 6 years.
All right. Okay, well, we have some homework to do, I think.
Thank you.
John, did you have a comment?
Well, more questions, really. You made a couple of statements. One, which sort of slid past unremarked so far, was that some of their fill has actually flowed into, you referred to it as our property. I assume you're referring to Lot 8, which is now belongs to the town of Harwich.
Lot 8?
And so do you have evidence that their fill actually is in Lot 8?
No, what we've asked for multiple times is for the town to request an as-built, have the building commissioner go out there, have someone tell us that it is or is not.
What's the basis for you making that statement?
Because we have abutters who live on Forest Street, and we have abutters that live on Sisson Road that have walked it dozens of times. I would ask maybe that we all go out for a walk and see. We've also saw people that, we have neighbors, some of whom are recusing themselves because they sit on other boards on this matter. They saw them doing the work, and there's no vegetation installed. So it's in the same conditions. So that's, in respect, I hear what you're saying about the buffer. So if I'm incorrect on the buffer, I'll accept that. I'll accept being incorrect on anything.
So, but here's just a general question. I was out there today and I saw that the section, it's probably in what's listed here as lot 20 or parcel 20 or whatever. I'm looking at the mass mapper, but that, I don't know what lot number that is in the development plan, but that whole thing going east from the cul-de-sac is, and maybe flowing into the next lot, that's all just fill or bare sand. So was there anything in the order of conditions, or was there any purview from the Conservation Commission that set requirements for what should be done in that area? I mean, you're saying there's no vegetation, but
Among other things, as we read them, it says the restoration of the turtle management plan and the forever wild areas, which are double referenced back in the deed restriction.
Okay, answer me a simple question. What area, because I read some of this stuff today, it
Yeah,
was all
it's all
dumped
new.
on us.
Yeah.
But one of the many things that's unclear to me here is what areas does the turtle management plan cover?
There are maps that show what are known as forever wild areas, which are roughly the rear 1/3 of each residential lot. All 7 lots, and there's supposed to be a pump house, and there's in a package that I'm happy to send you from the selectmen of last November is a 9-page turtle management plan that falls under the purview of this commission, we believe, that none of it was done. And the NHESP has told me, again, a citizen had to ask, that they've done nothing. 0 in 6.5 years. Nothing. And we expect the turtles are gonna come back? It defies logic. And now they're asking for something. And I'm not looking for punitive, because, we're not looking for punitive penalties for fines. But this commission has standing in this argument, and I'm not a lawyer, but I've been doing this a long time, and I know what I'm talking about. I will go down with that ship. We know what we're talking about. We've read these documents for 17 months, over and over and over again. So I respectfully thank you for your time. I want to make sure that we let you go have dinner. But we are happy to take more questions. This is not the end. We thank Amy and your team for putting us on the agenda. And unless you guys have any other questions, but this is serious business. And as you say, I think it's precedent setting, not just the project, which is for the ZBA, and for citizens and commissions to opine on. But the precedent of not dealing with, frankly, a rogue owner with 9 acres in the center of town with the West Reservoir. I mean, part of the site is in the Herring River, or whatever it's called. Excuse me. And,
Not the herring, it is in the Herring River.
the top of the site, in fact, is. The top of the site at Sixon Road is, the top of Sisson Road, per the DEP, is in fact, by their own report, they're looking to offset the nitrogen in Saquatucket because that's where most of it is.
You said Herring River.
Part of the site is in the Herring River because of the nature of Sisson Road being the split between the two. That's what they've told us. They said it, their engineer said it. So we're happy to.
Thank you for coming
Thank you.
tonight.
We appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Great. The next item we have under our discussion and possible vote is fertilizer bylaw. And let me just preface this, and we'll, at the, last night's presentation, annual report to the Board of Selectmen, there were a number of people that brought up the issue with fertilizer. One was an individual who I believe chaired the Trails Committee, Bikeways Committee. Another individual that, on the Wastewater Commission, Dan Pelletier he made a comment too about the problem we're having with well levels and how it makes it that much more difficult because they have to scrub the nitrogen out of the water before they send it out, type of a thing as well. So the more nitrogen that we find in the watershed, the more of a problem it is for our water department. And then I got up, and part of our presentation as well was to tell the selectmen that from our perspective, we do need to do something with fertilizer and use in the town. And part of the presentation I gave to them included some data from a report that was done by the Cape Cod Commission back in 2014. It was performed by an environmental group, consulting group out of Sandwich. And the stuff that was in it was just incredible. It covered both pesticides and fertilizer. But what they did was, on the fertilizer section, which is what I was most focused on, they identified that in 2014, as of when this report was done, 3.6 million pounds of fertilizer were applied on the Cape to just residential lots. Doesn't include golf courses, doesn't include agriculture, doesn't include municipalities, doesn't include commercial use. 3.6 million pounds of fertilizer. The residential use of fertilizer as a total was 69% of the total amount of fertilizer applied on the Cape was strictly on residential lots. It's just astounding to read what they've uncovered in this report. And I mentioned that to the Board of Selectmen, and I also, you may well know that Nantucket has already passed a fertilizer ban on the island. They don't allow any fertilizer whatsoever on Nantucket. Orleans has proposed a fertilizer ban for their town. And from what our understanding is, the way they have to do that, state law won't allow the town to just arbitrarily ban fertilizer. You have to go to a town meeting and have the town populace vote on it. And in order to get to that point, you have to go to the state legislature and ask and petition them for a home rule exemption or whatever, so you can put it on your town meeting agenda. Once it's passed by the town, once you go through the legislature, once you get your home rule petition approved by the legislature, you can put it on your town meeting agenda, and if the town votes for it, then we can enact it. I talked with Don Howell about this after I saw what Orleans was attempting to do, and he said he and along with most of the other selectmen are well in favor of this. Matter of fact, Don even said he would rather see us somehow spearhead a Cape-wide ban on fertilizer, because all this stuff we're hearing about water now, we all realize that we can put a ban here in place in Harwich, and Chatham homeowners can dump all the fertilizer they want, and it goes right into everybody's watershed. So, that doesn't necessarily cure it doing on a town-by-town basis, but nonetheless, at least it's a start, I think. So what Don asked for, and I've also been talking with Sharon Fliegler, who chairs the Board of Health, Harwich Board of Health. She's also looking to do something as well. Don asked that we provide a letter of support to the Board of Selectmen from the Conservation Commission, and a separate one or a joint one from the Board of Health, recommending that we pursue or start to pursue a ban here in Harwich for residential use. I'm not concerned about golf courses, agriculture, any cranberry bogs, anything like that. I think that's the least of our problems. The bigger issue is the golf course lawns we see around town that are still being irrigated at the same time they're dumping the fertilizer on them. I mean, we saw it, when was it, that this issue down on Old Mill Point with the guy that swore up and down that he understood how bad fertilizer was, and the next time Amy was out there, he was putting fertilizer on his lawn. So I don't know how to deal with this other than do what we can to try to get a ban put in place here in town. That's my feeling anyhow. So I'm looking for your support tonight to vote to approve send a letter to the Board of Selectmen in support of that.
I very much generally support the idea. I think the devil will be in the details, however, because there's a lot of different things that you might call fertilizer, and people use fertilizers for things other than just their lawns. And I suggest that if we're going to be serious about this, the first thing to do is find out exactly what they did in Nantucket. I don't know anything about those details, because just saying you can't fertilize your lawn, I think you're going to run into a brick wall doing that, because people are gonna come up with all kinds of arguments about, what about this, what about that, you know? I think you have to be very detailed and targeted to come up with a bylaw or whatever it is that makes sense and will be able to stand up to whatever assault comes after it, because it's not something that's just gonna happen. I mean, there's gonna be serious lobbying against this, right?
No
People make
question.
money
Yep.
doing this, and there'll be people on both sides who are pretty passionate about it, right? So I think it has to be targeted and very detailed and well thought out about exactly what you mean by no fertilizers. And the first way to do that is to look at other examples of what other towns have succeeded in getting by. And I don't know, what you're looking for tonight is just a general expression of support for this idea?
Yeah.
And
To
what
begin the process, I think, is what we need to do. As you say, the devil's in the details. There's a ton of groundwork that needs to be laid for something like this to go into effect. And I mean, who's gonna enforce it? How are they gonna enforce it? You know, I mean, it just goes on and on and on, but I'm getting the sense that support is there to at least start the process. Stan?
Well, yeah, a couple of things. One is, like what John says, I'd be interested in to see how Nantucket got that bylaw passed. Okay? Because that's the battle. I mean, you know, I was just at a neighborhood picnic, and everybody was talking about their fertilizer or irrigation, and they're like, I've had my house for over 10 years, I've never used an ounce of fertilizer, I've got a Cape Cod lawn. And that's fine with me, it's more mulch than lawn anyways in my yard, as you know. So, before you start worrying about enforcing it, how are you gonna get it passed? Because a lot of people, like John said and you said, it's gonna be a lot of opposition for all of these people that do have the lawns and want to have the green lawns.
From what I've read with respect to Orleans, some of the biggest opponents up there have been Snows and Agways.
And probably landscaping companies too.
Well, I'm not sure so much. I don't know. They didn't mention them specifically.
Well, I mean,
Because I don't think
just-
they're quite as organized, but
Maybe,
nonetheless.
maybe.
But the fertilizer sales apparently represent like 10% of their revenues, those two outlets. It's a huge chunk for them.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
If I may, first time hearing of it, so, I mean, I've heard these discussions in my whole life here, you know, different things about fertilizer, people point to this, that. I couldn't support it right now. Here's my reasons why. I need more information from water commissioners, from scientific data. I need to know what the impacts are gonna be doing, as John talked about, the pros and cons, both sides, everybody's gonna have all this deliberations back and forth. The economic engines behind it, the devaluation of property in the town. How is that gonna affect the assessors department when there's $1 million house, beautifully landscaped? We know there's something going on there, fertilization, horticulture, all that stuff's happening. Now that goes away, you can't fertilize it, it devalues. What's the impact on the town's coffers coming in? And I'm just throwing these things out here. These are
Yeah.
just things that you're gonna hear on the other side, as I'm just sitting here thinking. So there is something to look at. 3.5 million pounds of fertilizer is a lot of fertilizer. There are, you know, Cape Cod lawns, everybody has that. Some people can't afford to have these things. It's a certain amount of folks that can, and they hire people to do that. So there's gonna be the haves and have-nots, all those things. It's a big statement. It's a big thing. This town banned plastic bottles. If we have a hurricane event, what are we gonna do? People don't have any spring water at home in bottles. They used to go into the store and get spring bottles, you know, all these things. Now they go to Highness BJ's and get it and bring it to Harwich. Who's gonna police it? Who's gonna enforce it? It's a big, big item. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying I can't support something yet without more information that really, what's driving that? How do we really know scientifically that that is? Maybe there's information out there that I gotta learn and read more of.
I will send you the report, the 2014 report.
Ernie, going back to the initial request is from the selectmen to support the beginning of the process is what my understanding, not
Yes.
to go any further than that, just to say we need to look into this as to possibly getting to a point of trying to put it in a bylaw.
Yeah.
So this is just the first step.
Effectively, right now, when we go through these hearings, we have conditions, you know, when they're in the resource area, we say no fertilizer, none of this. So we're already started that. That discussion's already out there. And is it part of our bylaw that says?
It's toothless.
No, but does our bylaw actually say that we can enforce within the resource area, correct?
Yes, only within our resource area.
Resource area.
Correct.
So that's addressed already. So people know that. This is a positive. People already are living with that. So now if you expand it, you know, who's to say it's right or wrong, but,
So, just to address some of what you're saying, Alan, I think it's rather well understood and accepted that a certain percentage of the nitrogen that's causing us to be under a consent decree to reduce the amount of nitrogen flowing into all our saltwater embayments, that comes from fertilizers that people put on their lawns. That's well understood. It's well understood how that nitrogen percolates into the groundwater and eventually finds its way into saltwater estuaries. I think it's also pretty well understood that the phosphorus in fertilizer also finds its way, the mechanisms are different, the effects are different, but finds its way into our freshwater supplies and cause problems like the one at Skinnequid Pond, like the one at Grass Pond. Those things are not, those things in and of themselves, I don't believe are particularly controversial. It's well known and well understood that those are problems. Fertilizer is definitely not the only cause of that problem, but it's a measurable, pretty well understood component of those problems that are costing Cape Cod and Harwich a ton of money to try to remediate, and we don't even know how to remediate some of these things, like the problems with freshwater ponds. And Ernie can send you the report he has. You can look at the report that the study of Hinckley's that was done that eventually resulted in the Alum treatment in Hinckley's. Is pretty extensive quantitative analysis of where all the components of the phosphorus that caused the problem there came from. Some of that is fertilizer people put on their lawns. It's pretty well understood. And by the way, not just on lawns, cranberry bogs too, we're a big part of that problem, but it's the same thing. It's the phosphorus and the fertilizers that go on the lawns and other places. And so I don't think we need to debate that.
You know, the other thing, you mentioned things like property devaluation and all. I mean, you look at, just this summer, how many beaches were closed because of algae blooms. You can't shellfish now in half of the estuaries because of toxic tides that are going through it. That's where your property devaluation is going to come from, because the Cape is not going to be a destination place anymore when everything's dead. And unless we start doing something about it soon, and it's going to take 2 years just to get this home rule petition in place before we can even think about putting a ban on. If we don't start doing something, if we keep trying to study the issue before we start acting, you know, it just puts us that much farther behind the 8 ball.
I understand, I got where you're coming
And
from.
they've
but
proved
Right
it.
now, I just need more information myself.
Yeah.
The other side of the coin is, I can think of many things that affect the environment. Salt on the roads, the highways in the wintertime. Now you see, it used to be mixture with salt and sand. Now it's just plain salt and chloride. I believe.
Liquid salt.
Liquid salt and all those
Sure.
things. And that's nonstop.
Yeah, it is.
You don't see any sand on the roads anymore.
I mean, you gotta pick your battles, right?
Well, I'm just saying, I mean, there's a lot of items out there that contribute to it. I hear it, I understand that. I just don't know how we're gonna get there. It's gonna be a big challenge, as John said.
But inactivity is not gonna do it.
I agree, I understand, I understand.
But again, going back to what my question was with the selectmen, this is to take the first step. And if you're not gonna take the first step, while you're, like what Ernie was saying, the studying's gonna have to be part of the process to get the support from everybody. But you gotta take the first step to say, yes, we're in favor of going forward.
One other fertilizer, I just remember my father years ago had strawberry patch in West Howard on Route 20. He used to put malagonite, if I'm saying it correctly, and that's human waste.
Oh, yeah?
Well, it's human waste fertilizer.
Yeah.
It's organic, yeah.
It's organic, but it's human waste.
Well,
Now,
Comes from the
That
city of
anymore,
Chicago, it's been around for 50, 60 years.
Yeah.
Great stuff.
so I mean, if we're gonna have solutions too, compromise on the other side of it, I guess.
Yeah.
What can you do? What technology's out there to have that Cape Cod lawn be the way to go?
Yeah, I mean, people, well, I mean, a lot.
I know, it's a touchy subject, not for me
There's no
personally,
question, Al.
I'm just
It's
thinking
a
of the community and
huge
people, that's all,
Yeah,
not just me, I'm just
yeah.
thinking.
Well, I hear you. Any thoughts, Wayne?
I'm not happy about it, but I think it's something that time has come that it needs to be addressed. I mean, I'm a pretty freedom type of guy and personal freedoms and stuff, but collectively, we gotta think about our water. And if this is really a bad issue as, they're saying, and the report says stuff, it's something we really gotta think serious about doing. And I don't like it, but just for a few reasons, but if it's gotta be done, it's gotta be done.
Well, the reason I put it on the agenda tonight was, what I would like to do is ask if we're generally in favor of having Amy draft a letter to the selectmen, and perhaps bring it back to the next meeting, and we can vote on it, to have her forward it. And in the meantime, I'll send you the report, you can read the
That'd
thing.
be helpful, yes, thank you.
That was.
Yeah, I'd like to,
That was almost 8 years, that was 8 years ago, so what's that, 3.5 million
It's-
pounds now?
Yeah, well, that's the thing, yeah, how many,
I'd be curious to know what the golf courses are putting on.
it's in the report.
Is there?
Yeah, and the irony is, even with we're seeing with this water program too, is that the golf courses are learning how to do it and minimizing their use of fertilizers and water.
they see the handwriting on
Yeah,
the
they're
tree.
being forced, right?
Yeah, so it's not, unfortunately, homeowners don't read from the same book. They just hire the landscaper and they fire them if the lawn doesn't look like you can putt on it.
Exactly.
I mean, I know when I was building as ground supervisor at the school, we had RF Morse come down and put the athletic field fertilizer on. It was 150 pounds per acre, and that was 4 applications per year.
Yeah.
So, I mean, but you had to do that because the kids are on.
But that's exempt. That
No, I
falls under the
understand. No, I
exemptions, the
understand. I know.
municipal use and agricultural use and stuff like that.
Right.
I don't wanna touch that, and that's not where the problems are.
No,
It's the homeowners.
I just wanna see the data.
Yeah.
Like I said, I just can't support it tonight, but going forward, as Wayne says, it is, and you said it. You don't have a beach, you don't have a place to come here, nobody's gonna wanna come here. I mean, I understand that part. And you can't drink your water, you can't flush the toilet and drink that,
If we do lose our drinking water, we're screwed.
Yeah. So, I don't think we need to necessarily take a vote on this, Amy, but, can I ask, is everybody generally in favor of having her draft a letter to
Yeah,
the selectmen that?
bring it to the next meeting so we can read it over and
All right,
vote on it then.
okay, good.
And I'd like a copy of that report too, if you could.
Yeah, absolutely, I can forward it to you. Amy can forward it to you. I don't have your emails, but she.
Yeah, I'll forward you that, and if I have other things that I think are appropriate too, I'll forward those along, and I can draft kind of a generic letter, say, the Conservation Commission supports starting the process of investigating whether some sort of fertilizer bylaw would be in the best interest of Harwich.
Yep, okay.
You know, it is gonna be a long process, but as a wise man once said, a journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step.
I will say so the town looked into this probably 5-6 years ago. I've been here for about 12 years now, and I've never seen as much support for contemplating this as I've seen now in town. So I think the time, if you want to do it, is to do it now.
Good. All right, thank you, everyone,
All right.
for bearing with me on that one. It
Well,
was,
it's a good way to talk things through.
Yeah.
It's a process, it's good.
so the last thing we have is minutes, October 2nd minutes. Anybody have it?
For second,
They-
2020.
2019. Yeah.
I read them over.
I'm gonna sign off. If there's changes, if somebody could make them, that'd be great. If you want more, if anybody wants to chat about Chloe's path, I'm more than happy to talk with you about it.
How do you think that this?
Go forward.
No, I won't ask you tonight. Okay,
Feel better.
good. Thanks, Amy. Thank you for putting up with us.
No, thank you guys.
Okay.
Night.
I had no comments on the meeting, on the minutes rather, I'm sorry.
I wasn't here then, so I don't recuse myself.
I wasn't either.
So I'm not recused.
But you don't need to be here if you had a chance to review them. So I had no changes. Can we vote on them?
Yeah.
Okay.
I move to approve the minutes for October 21st.
October 2nd, 2019?
Yeah, those
Those
minutes.
minutes.
October 2nd, 2019.
Okay, we have a second.
Was I there that day?
Wait a second.
Second, all in favor? Yay, terrific. And I move we adjourn the meeting.
I'll second that.
All in favor? We're good.